The rain comes down in thin, cold sheets, soaking through your jacket before you even realise you should have brought an umbrella. You duck into the subway entrance more to escape the weather than because you actually need to go anywhere. The stairs are slick, reflecting the weak glow of fluorescent lights that buzz and flicker overhead like dying insects. Your usual platform is blocked off. Yellow maintenance barriers stretch across the entrance, forcing you down a side corridor you've never noticed before. The tiles here are older, cracked in places, and the air smells different, stale, like a room that hasn't been opened in decades. Torn posters advertise concerts from years ago, their edges curling away from the walls. This feels like a part of the station the city forgot to update, or maybe just forgot entirely. The corridor dead ends at an alcove where a payphone hangs on the wall. You haven't seen a working payphone in years. The glass booth around it is missing. Just the metal frame remains, bolted directly into the grimy tile. The handset dangles on its cord, swaying slightly in the draft that whistles through the tunnel. Someone has taped shut the coin return slot with yellowed packing tape. You step closer, curious despite yourself. A metal plaque above the keypad should display the phone number or instructions, but it's been covered with a hand-scratched marker note. The letters are cramped and uneven, carved with something sharp. Berlin, 09, Nov, 1989. You reach out and lift the handset, expecting the dead silence of a disconnected line. Instead, you hear a dial tone, clear, steady, impossibly alive. The sound sends a chill down your spine that has nothing to do with your wet clothes. The keypad looks ancient. The buttons are stiff under your fingers when you test them, and the call price label makes no sense. Coins that haven't been in circulation for decades. A telecom company logo you vaguely remember from childhood. Above the keypad, more scratched letters form a message. Dial your own number backward. Last coin at 11:30 p.m. Say open when it flips, don't hang up. You check your phone, 11:27 p.m. The second hand on the old analog station clock across the platform ticks steadily toward 11:28. Your heart starts beating faster, though you're not sure why. This is obviously some kind of prank, some urban art project someone installed to freak out late-night commuters. But your hand is already pulling out your wallet, fishing for coins. You have exactly 1/4 left from buying coffee earlier. Your phone screen glows as you pull it up, displaying your number. The idea of dialing it backward, last digit first, working in reverse, makes your palms sweat. You pocket your phone and rehearse the sequence in your head. The corridor is empty except for you. Somewhere in the deeper tunnels you hear the distant rumble of a train, but it doesn't stop here. This platform hasn't seen regular service in a long time. At 11:28 you try, slotting the coin into the phone. It clanks down into the mechanism but immediately ejects back into the return slot, clinking against the tape someone used to seal it. The phone won't accept it. Not yet. The clock ticks to 11:29. You feed the coin again. This time it stays, dropping into the phone's internal mechanism with a solid thunk that sounds final. Your hand is shaking as you start pressing buttons, each one making a loud electronic beep that echoes in the empty corridor. Last digit first, then the second to last. Working backward through your own number feels wrong, like reading something in a mirror. The dial tone drops away as you press the final button. For a moment there's nothing, just hollow silence. Then you hear it. A low distant murmur, like crowd noise heard through thick walls. Voices speaking in a language you can't quite place. The sound of many people gathered in some vast space. The station clock's minute hand trembles toward 11:30. You watch it, the handset pressed against your ear, barely breathing. The murmur grows louder, more distinct. You can hear individual voices now, though you still can't understand the words. There's an urgency to them, excitement mixed with something that might be fear or confusion. The clock flips to 11:30 p.m. Exactly. You whisper, "Open!" The payphone's light explodes with a sharp pop, raining tiny fragments of plastic and glass. The corridor plunges into darkness. Your stomach lurches like you're in an elevator that's dropped too fast, and the air snaps cold around you, so cold your breath comes out in clouds. For one disorienting second, you hear shouting in German layered over the subway rumble, the two sounds occupying the same impossible moment. Then the light comes back. But it's not fluorescent anymore. You're standing on wet cobblestones under sodium yellow street lamps, their glow harsh and industrial. Floodlights blaze from guard towers, cutting through the night mist. You blink, trying to process what you're seeing. The subway corridor is gone. The payphone is gone. You're outside in the middle of a street that looks like something from a documentary. Checkpoint Charlie. Even if you didn't know the name, you'd recognize it from history books and films. The white guard booth, the signs in multiple languages, the concrete barriers dividing the street. Beyond them, the wall rises, scarred with graffiti and weathering, stretching away in both directions until it disappears into the darkness. It's November 9th, 1989. Somehow, impossibly, you know this with absolute certainty. Crowds press against the barriers on both sides. People wave banners and homemade signs. Faces show anxiety, excitement, disbelief. A strange mixture of emotions you've never seen outside of footage of historical events. The air smells like cold concrete and exhaust fumes and something else. Something charged and electric that you can't quite name. You try to move and discover you can. You can walk, breathe, look around, but no one seems to see you. A man in a heavy coat walks right through the space where you're standing, and you feel a momentary chill pass through your chest. He shivers and scratches at his neck, but he doesn't turn around. You're here, but you're not. An invisible observer to history. Cold mist curls through the beams of searchlights. Somewhere nearby, radios crackle with confused announcements. You catch fragments, words about travel, visas, immediately, without delay. Border guards huddle in small groups, looking uncertain. The crowd's energy builds, wave after wave of it pushing against the barriers. Where the payphone should be, where you remember it being just seconds ago in your subway corridor, there's only a section of the wall itself, high and imposing, covered in layers of graffiti, its concrete surface scarred by weather and time. You drift closer to the actual checkpoint barrier. The painted lines on the pavement mark where east stops and west begins, though these lines are becoming increasingly meaningless as the night progresses. Families clutch documents with shaking hands. Young people chant something in German you don't understand. Older faces stare in stunned silence, as if afraid to believe what they're witnessing. A woman next to you is crying, but she's smiling too. She says something to the man beside her, and he nods, unable to speak. You move through them, a ghost at their celebration. The crowd fragments into dozens of conversations, each one a different piece of the story unfolding. They said on the news, "My sister is on the other side. Don't know if they'll let us through. Cannot believe this is happening." Word is spreading faster than official instructions can be issued. Some crossings have been allowed, others haven't. The guards themselves seem confused about what they're supposed to do. The night has the feeling of something balanced on a knife's edge, about to tip in a direction no one can predict. Beneath it all, faint but persistent, you hear something that doesn't belong. The tick of a station clock. Your station clock from your forgotten subway platform, somehow threading through time to reach you here. The sound is your heartbeat and your anchor, the only thing connecting you to the present you left behind. Then you remember the second part of the rule, the instruction you saw scratched beneath the first message. Find a working phone booth on this side of the wall, call the same broken subway payphone at the instant the first chunk of concrete is smashed free. That's how you get back. In the distance, you hear metallic clanking sounds. People have started climbing onto the wall. You can see their silhouettes against the floodlights, dark figures scrambling up the graffitied surface. Some of them have hammers. The first blows ring out, hammer against concrete, a sound that will echo through history. But when is the first chunk? The first crack in the surface? The first piece that actually falls free? The first officially sanctioned removal? The timing will be chaotic, and if you miss it, you don't want to think about what happens if you miss it. You test your presence by deliberately walking toward a guard. As you pass through his personal space, he shivers and looks around, confused. His hand goes to his neck, scratching, as if he felt a cobweb or a cold draft. But he doesn't see you. When you concentrate hard on the distant ticking of your subway clock, the scene around you fades slightly. Colours lose saturation. Sounds become muffled. The world here is somehow conditional, dependent on your attention to maintain its solidity. Staying too long will either snap you back randomly, or worse, embed you so deeply in this night that you become part of it permanently. Another thought strikes you, chilling in its implications. If your present can be reached from here, if a payphone in your time can connect backward to this moment, then the reverse must also be true. Changes made to borders tonight might echo forward through time. Every wall that falls here might erase a different kind of boundary in your own world. You need to find a phone booth, now. You peel away from the checkpoint, moving through East Berlin's streets. The buildings here are low and Soviet bland, storefronts with dim signs, trabants parked haphazardly along curbs. People stream toward the wall from every direction, called by news spreading through underground networks and official broadcasts that contradict each other. You walk for what feels like hours but might only be minutes. Time is strange here, elastic. Finally you spot it. A glass phone booth glowing under a weak streetlight, its door propped open with a brick. The handset dangles on its cord. You run the last few meters, your feet somehow making no sound on the cobblestones. Inside the booth, a phone directory hangs lopsided from a chain. The glass is fogged with breath and covered in graffiti, names, dates, messages scratched and drawn by countless users. You lift the handset. There's a dial tone. The line is alive. Behind you, the roar from the direction of the wall grows louder. More people climbing, more hammers striking concrete, the sound of history being physically dismantled one blow at a time. You realise you know the subway payphone's number. You didn't memorise it consciously, but it's in your head as clearly as your own number, maybe because you dialed your own number backward to get here. The knowledge is just there, waiting. You start dialing. The numbers click through the mechanical system and the line rings once before dissolving into that layered murmur you heard before. Voices and time mixing together in a sound that shouldn't exist. The crowd erupts in a new roar. You hear it distinctly. The sharp crack of concrete breaking, a sound like thunder but localized, followed by cheers. The first unmistakable piece of the wall coming free. You time it, perfectly saying the word into the booth's mouthpiece just as the sound of falling concrete reaches your ears. Open. The booth light flickers. The cobblestones under your feet feel like subway platform tile for one disorienting heartbeat. The sound of Berlin and the sound of your city overlap, occupying the same moment. Then the cobblestones solidify again beneath you. You're still here. But something has changed. You feel it in your chest. Something tugging loose, attention releasing. The subway clock's ticking is louder now, closer. The call partially worked. You're a step nearer to home. In your present, though you can't see it, the first border has been erased. A long-disputed line on your city's digital maps, boundaries between districts that communities have argued over for years, quietly vanishes from every app and database and street sign. People won't notice until morning, and when they do, they'll assume it was always that way. You realise with sinking certainty that one call isn't enough. The wall doesn't fall in a single moment. It falls in stages, through dozens of breaks and openings spread across hours. You'll have to match them, call by call, each one bringing you closer to home while erasing another border in your own time. Back at Checkpoint Charlie, you see the situation spiralling beyond anyone's control. Some guards wave people through with weary resignation. Others argue among themselves about what the new orders actually mean. Some simply step aside, removing themselves from the decision entirely. The barriers between East and West are still physically present, but they're becoming functionally meaningless as thousands of people flow through. You return to the booth. Another section of wall comes down. You hear it, the crash and the cheer. You dial again, matching your word to the moment of impact. Open. The lurch toward home is stronger this time. You can smell your city's rain cutting through Berlin's cold night air. The sound of subway rumbles overlays the sound of celebrating crowds. But you're still here, still caught between moments. The second border erases back home. Zone-based transit fares disappear overnight. The complex system of coloured rings and price tiers that has frustrated commuters for decades simply flattens into a single unified fare. Transit authorities will scramble tomorrow to figure out what happened to their systems, why every database shows it's always been a flat fare, why all the signage suddenly seems outdated and wrong. You make a third call, matching it to another decisive break. A guard gate swung permanently open, its hinges torn free. This time you feel the effect personally. A long-standing legal boundary vanishes from city code, a curfew district, a restricted area, something that has kept certain neighbourhoods separate from others. The change ripples forward through time. The fourth call comes as people start dancing on top of the wall, hammering it with tools they brought or Found nearby. You dial, you time it, you say the word, and this time the cost becomes intimate and personal. Back in your present, a boundary you once set in your own life melts away. An ex you blocked 2 years ago becomes unblocked. Messages you shouldn't be receiving start arriving. A family member you cut out of your life finds their number working again when they try to call you. Doors you deliberately closed are mysteriously, impossibly open again. With each call, the boundary between Berlin and your city blurs more. When you look at the wall's graffiti now, you see it overlaying memories of your subway corridors peeling posters, the sound of hammers striking concrete echoes with the rhythm of subway rumbles. You're becoming untethered from both places, existing in some liminal space between them. The crowds can almost see you now. When you pass through someone, they don't just shiver, they jerk their heads, looking around as if they caught movement in their peripheral vision. You're becoming more real here, even as you try desperately to leave. The subway clock in your skull ticks faster, its rhythm accelerating toward alignment with your true present moment. There's a final synchronization point coming. You can feel it approaching like a wave about to break. One last moment when the symbolic barrier falls completely. A rumour sweeps through the crowd. Official demolition crews are coming. Not just people with hammers and chisels, but real equipment. Bulldozers, work crews, cameras. This will be the moment that makes every history book, the image that defines the night. You see the lights first, television crews setting up, floodlights even brighter than the permanent installations. Then you hear the engine, the heavy rumble of machinery moving through streets not designed for it. The crowd parts, and a bulldozer crawls into view, flanked by workers in hard hats and officials with clipboards. They mark a section of wall for removal, a huge symbolic piece right at the checkpoint. Cameras flash. The crowd on both sides swells, pressed together in anticipation. This is it. The defining break. You run back to the phone booth, your lungs burning even though you're not sure you're breathing real air anymore. The crowd's roar sounds muffled, like you're hearing it underwater. Everything has taken on a dreamlike quality, edges blurring, colours too vivid. You dial the payphone number one last time. The line is hot, buzzing with energy that makes the handset vibrate in your grip. Through the phone you hear both the dial tone and something else. Your own city's rain, traffic sounds, the ambient noise of your present waiting for you to return. The bulldozer's engine roars. The machine angles toward the marked section of wall. The crowd counts down, or maybe they're just screaming, the sound building to a crescendo. The blade hits concrete. The wall section tips, seeming to fall in slow motion. Dust blooms into the air, caught in the floodlights, like an explosion of stars. You time your word with the exact instant the concrete slams into the ground. Open! The phone booth implodes into darkness. Not gradually, instantly, like someone turned off the universe. Sound collapses into a single point and then expands again, but wrong, coming from directions that shouldn't exist. You feel barriers tearing, legal boundaries, emotional walls, geographic borders, fluttering around you like paper caught in a windstorm. For one impossible second you stand in both places simultaneously. The glass booth and the subway payphone alcove. Berlin's cheering thousands and your city's late-night emptiness. Past and present, there and here, collapsed into the same moment. Then the subway corridor snaps back into solidity around you. You stumble, catching yourself against the wall. The payphone hangs quietly on its cord, its light steady and ordinary now. The handset is in your hand, dial tone humming. You slam it back onto the cradle with shaking hands. The marker plaque still says Berlin 09 and Nov 1989, but it looks older somehow, like a relic or historical marker that's been here for years. The scratched instructions are still visible, waiting for the next person to read them. Your clothes are soaked with rain again, your presence rain. The forgotten platform is exactly as you left it. Maintenance barriers still blocking the regular entrance, fluorescent lights still buzzing overhead. But you feel different, lighter, like something that was weighing you down has been removed. You climb the stairs back to street level, and your city is wrong. Not obviously wrong, not apocalyptically different, just subtly, undeniably altered in ways that make you question your memory. The fence around the park across from the subway entrance is gone. You remember it being there, chain-link topped with barbed wire posted with no trespassing signs. But now there's just an open lawn, people walking freely across it even at this late hour, and everyone acts like it's always been that way. You walk through your neighbourhood, cataloguing changes. The boundary markers between districts are gone or have been painted over. Neighbourhoods that used to have sharp reputations, this area rough, that area upscale, feel blended, their edges hazy. People who wouldn't have mixed before are in the same coffee shops, the same bars. You pull out your phone to check the transit map. The coloured fare zones you've navigated your entire life are gone. The map shows a simple, unified system. Single fare, no zones. In the corner, like a ghost layer beneath the current design, you can almost see the old coloured rings, but they're faint, uncertain, like something half remembered from a dream. Your message notifications explode as the phone connects to the network. Text after text from your ex, casual and familiar, as if the 2 years of silence never happened. A missed call from the family member you swore you'd never speak to again. An invitation to dinner from them, dated yesterday, suggesting a regular pattern of contact. Everyone acts like it's always been this way. Like these softer borders, these erased lines, are simply how the city has always worked. Only you remember it differently, and even your memories are starting to feel uncertain, like maybe you're the one who's wrong about how things used to be. That night, in your apartment, you try to make sense of what happened. You write down everything you remember, trying to anchor the experience in words before it fades. But the more you write, the more dreamlike it becomes. Did you really travel back to 1989? Or did you have some kind of episode in the subway, and these changes to your city are just coincidence or your own confused perception? The only certainty is this: borders in your city have fallen. Lines that used to be solid have become permeable. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you can still hear that subway station clock ticking, feel the weight of that payphone handset in your palm. Days pass. You try to return to normal, but the forgotten platform calls to you. On rainy nights especially, when the weather mirrors that first night, you find yourself drawn back. You stand in front of the maintenance barriers, looking down the side corridor to where the payphone waits. The plaque's date hasn't changed. Berlin, 9. November 1989. The instructions are still there, scratched into the metal. The rule is patient, waiting for someone to follow it again. Waiting for you to follow it again. Because you've started to wonder, if more calls mean fewer walls, what happens when you run out of borders to erase? The city has plenty of lines left. Property boundaries, legal restrictions, social divisions. But at some point, don't you need those borders? Don't they serve a purpose? What happens when you start unmaking the lines that keep you safe, sane, separate from chaos? You close your eyes and you're back there, feeling the crowd on both sides of the wall, the moment when people realized they could cross, the pure electricity of boundaries dissolving. It was terrifying and exhilarating and deeply, fundamentally human. The desire to tear down walls, to erase lines, to be free of divisions. But every wall that falls reveals what it was holding back. Every border erased connects things that were separate for a reason. You live now in a city that has learned too well how to let lines go. Your ex texts you daily, expecting responses, confused when you don't reply immediately. Your family member shows up at your door unannounced, claiming you'd agreed to visits you never agreed to. Neighbourhoods blend together, and the crime statistics shift accordingly. The transit system's unified fare means overcrowding on routes that used to be protected by zone pricing. Nothing is settled, everything is permeable, and you carry a choice that grows heavier each night. Leave the payphone hanging, let it be a relic of a single night when a wall opened and history turned. Let the borders you've already erased be enough, or pick it up again. Dial backward. Keep matching moments of falling walls to calls forward through time. Keep testing how much of you, how much of your world can survive once all the borders are gone. Tonight, standing in the forgotten platform with rain echoing down the subway entrance, you lift the handset one more time, just to hear the dial tone, just to remember how it felt. The tone is clear and steady, waiting. The clock on the platform reads 11:29 p.m. Your last coin sits in your pocket, somehow returned there, ready. The instructions haven't changed. Your number glows on your phone screen. And somewhere, in a Berlin that exists in 1989 and always, people are still climbing the wall, still breaking it apart piece by piece, still discovering what it means to erase a border that has divided the world. The clock ticks toward 11:30, and you have to decide. Do you believe in walls, or in the freedom that comes when they fall? Do you trust the lines that keep you safe, or the connection that comes when those lines disappear. You stand there for a long moment, the handset warming in your grip, your breath fogging in the cold tunnel air. The maintenance barriers behind you keep other passengers away, preserving this pocket of isolation. This forgotten corner of the city where time bends and rules written in scratched metal can unmake reality. Then you notice something you hadn't seen before. At the very bottom of the plaque, below the instructions, someone has carved a warning in letters so small you have to squint to read them. 5th call erases you. Your hand tightens on the handset. 5 calls. You've made 4. 1 more, and you won't just be erasing borders in your city. You'll erase yourself, or some essential part of yourself. The boundary between who you are and who you might become. The line that defines your identity, your memories, your continuous existence through time. You think about the people in Berlin that night, the ones whose faces you saw in the crowd. They didn't know what would happen when the wall fell. They didn't know if the guards would start shooting, if tanks would roll through the streets, if the whole thing would collapse into chaos or violence. They just knew that the wall had to come down, that the border had to be crossed, that the risk was worth whatever freedom waited on the other side. But they weren't erasing themselves. They were becoming more themselves, more free, more connected to the people they'd been separated from. Your situation is different. With each call, you're not becoming more, you're becoming less defined, less bordered, less you. You lower the handset slightly, but you don't hang up. The dial tone continues its patient hum. Your phone buzzes with another message from your ex, then another. They're getting worried now, wondering why you're not responding like you used to, like you apparently do in this altered timeline where the boundary you drew 2 years ago never existed. In their messages, you can see a version of yourself reflected back, someone who never had the strength to walk away, who never built that necessary wall, who remained entangled in a relationship that was slowly destroying them both. Is that better? Is that freer? Or is it just a different kind of prison, one without walls to mark where you end and someone else begins? You think about the transit system, the unified fares that seemed like such a democratic change. But you've noticed in the past few days that the trains are more crowded now, that people who could afford the premium zones are annoyed, that people who relied on the cheaper outer zones are getting pushed out by development that no longer respects those boundaries. Every change has consequences that ripple outward in ways you can't predict or control. The neighbourhood boundaries that disappeared. You walk through areas now that used to be clearly defined, and you see the confusion on long-time residents' faces as their communities blend and shift. The corner store that served one neighbourhood for 30 years doesn't know who its customers are anymore. The community centre that advocated for its district can't figure out where its district begins or ends. Identity requires boundaries. Belonging requires knowing who is in and who is out. But then you remember the fence around the park, the one that disappeared. That was a good change, wasn't it? Kids play there now who couldn't before. People cut through on their way to work instead of walking around. That border falling made things objectively better. Maybe it's not about whether borders are good or bad. Maybe it's about which ones need to fall and which ones need to stand. The clock reads 11:29 and 45 seconds. You have 15 seconds to decide. Hang up and walk away, accepting the changes you've already made and living with their consequences. Or dial backward one more time, make the 5th call, match it to another moment of the wall falling, and discover what it means to erase the final border, the one that separates you from dissolution. Your finger hovers over the keypad. You've already memorized the sequence. Last digit first, working backward. It would take you less than 10 seconds to dial. You'd have time. The handset feels heavier than it should. Or maybe you feel lighter, less substantial, like you're already starting to fade at the edges, your boundaries becoming permeable. In Berlin, in 1989, in the eternal moment that the payphone connects to, someone is raising a hammer. Someone is climbing the wall. Someone is making the choice to break through. Consequences be damned. That night was full of people who decided that freedom was worth the risk, that connection was worth the chaos, that some walls deserve to be torn down no matter what comes after. But they had the benefit of hindsight now. You know how that story ended. The wall fell, and yes, there was chaos and confusion and hardship in the years that followed. But there was also reunion. Family members who hadn't seen each other in decades embracing at the border. A divided city becoming whole. A separated people finding each other again. Your situation is different. You're not reuniting with anyone. You're just dissolving. Becoming borderless in a way that might mean becoming nothing at all. The clock hits 11:30, you don't dial. Instead, you hang up the handset with a decisive click that echoes through the empty platform. The dial tone cuts off. The payphone sits silent, waiting, patient. It will be here tomorrow night, and the night after, and every rainy night when you feel the pull of that Berlin crowd, that moment of possibility. But tonight, you choose to remain, to keep your borders, to accept that some walls are necessary, that some boundaries define rather than divide, that you need to know where you end and the world begins. You turn away from the payphone, from the scratched instructions and the warning you almost didn't see. Your footsteps echo as you walk back down the corridor toward the maintenance barriers. Behind you, the forgotten platform settles back into its patient waiting. A pocket of bent time that will be here for the next person who finds it, who needs to learn the same lesson about borders and what they cost. As you climb the stairs back to street level, back to your altered city with its fallen fences and erased zones and permeable neighbourhoods, you make a different kind of choice. You'll learn to live with the changes you've already made. You'll set new boundaries where the old ones fell. Not walls exactly, but lines drawn with intention, rather than inherited from a past you never questioned. You'll respond to your ex, but you'll tell them the truth, that something changed, that you need space, that whatever history they remember isn't the one you're choosing to continue. You'll talk to your family member, but you'll set terms, conditions, limits that define a relationship you can sustain. You'll use the unified transit system but advocate for the communities being disrupted by it. You'll walk through the park that has no fence but remember why some boundaries matter. The rain has stopped. The streets gleam with reflected light. Borders of wet and dry, shadow and illumination. Your city spreads out around you, subtly strange, forever altered by choices made in a forgotten subway platform on a night when you learned to say both open and stop. Somewhere in 1989 a wall continues falling. But here, now, you're learning which walls to let fall and which ones to build, which borders to erase and which ones to honour. It's a harder choice than simply dialing backward. It requires judgment and nuance and the willingness to live with ambiguity. But it lets you remain yourself, defined, bordered, human. You walk home through your changed city, and for the first time since that first night, you feel like maybe you can live here. Maybe you can learn to navigate a world where some walls have fallen and others still stand, where borders are negotiable rather than absolute, where the line between freedom and chaos requires constant attention to maintain. The payphone will still be there tomorrow, the temptation will return. But tonight, you've chosen to keep yourself intact, to preserve the boundary that matters most, the one that makes you you. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the real lesson the wall was trying to teach. Not that all borders should fall, but that we have to choose, consciously and carefully, which ones define us and which ones confine us. The rain starts again, soft and cold, and you let it wash over you as you walk, a living border between the dry warmth of your apartment and the wet night of the city, choosing with every step where you end and the world begins. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Rain needles sideways across your face as you climb the last metal ladder to the old broadcasting tower roof. Your fingers ache where they grip the slick rungs, and the wind tries to peel you backward into the dark. Lightning flashes behind the skyscrapers, turning the glass faces of downtown into a grid of white fire for one heartbeat, before plunging everything back into shadow. The city hum below, traffic, voices, the subway's distant rumble, feels muffled by thunder and wind, like you're climbing out of the world itself. At the centre of the roof sits a rusted satellite dish, its surface pocked with years of weather, cables snaking from its base into a weather-beaten shack that looks like it should have been condemned decades ago. Through a grimy window streaked with rain, you see a dusty CRT monitor flickering with static and a frozen title card in that retro NASA font. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 Live. You shoulder the shack's door open against the wind. Inside, the air is thick with dust and ozone, that electric smell that comes before lightning strikes too close. A big analog clock with a sweeping second hand hangs crooked on the wall, its tick audible even over the storm, counting toward 10:56 p.m. The monitor sits on a metal console crowded with old equipment. Tape reels, patch cables, switches with labels worn to nothing. Everything looks like it was abandoned in a hurry sometime in the 70s and left to gather ghosts. You wipe dust off the monitor controls with your sleeve, revealing a row of buttons and a dial. The tape, or maybe it's a digital loop, you can't tell which, rewinds with a mechanical whine when you turn the dial backward, the audio garbling as it scrolls through the familiar broadcast. Mission control voices, call signs, the steady professional calm of people doing the impossible. Your finger hovers over the play button as thunder rolls nearer, close enough that you feel it in your ribs. That's when you notice the notes scrawled on the console in faded red marker, the handwriting urgent and slanted. Sync. Eagle has landed, circumdan, flash, plus 10:56, cam 15. Do not blink. You read it 3 times, passing the instruction like a recipe. Outside, the lightning is getting rhythmic, building towards something. The clock's second hand sweeps past the 12, beginning another minute. The audio on the monitor hisses and pops with the build-up to lunar landing, voices overlapping, Houston calling out numbers and confirmations. You piece it together slowly, testing the logic in your head. Time the playback so the words "Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed" hit exactly when lightning flashes outside, and the clock's second hand crosses 10:56:15 p.m. Keep your eyes on the screen. Don't blink. Don't look away. It sounds insane. It sounds like the instructions to a magic spell someone made up while high. But your hands are already moving, rewinding the tape again, listening for the exact placement of Armstrong's voice, counting, backward from the landing confirmation to figure out when to start the playback. The storm cooperates, settling into a pattern, flashes every 20 to 30 seconds, close enough to time. You try once and miss. The line lands a second early, Armstrong's voice cutting through with "The Eagle has landed" just before the lightning paints the roof white. For a moment nothing happens, then static thickens on the screen, crawling across the image like insects. Your skin prickles, every hair standing up the way it does when you're too close to high voltage. But the world doesn't tip. The monitor's image bends slightly. Your reflection in the curved glass warps, doubles for a moment like you're seeing yourself and a twin standing in the same spot, then snaps back to normal. The clock hand passes 10:56 Euros 15 with a loud dissonant tick, like a gear slipping inside the mechanism. You rewind and exhale, your breath shaking. This time, you listen closer to the NASA loop, to the thunder's rhythm building outside, to the clock's heartbeat ticking away the seconds. You wait for the lightning to gather itself, counting in your head, feeling for the pattern. Second attempt. You start the playback a heartbeat later, fingers white on the button. The seconds count down, and your pulse syncs with the clock. Or maybe the clock syncs with your pulse, you can't tell which. The phrase approaches through layers of static and distance. Tranquility Base here. And lightning blossoms white across the roof, so bright it turns the shack's interior into an X-ray. Every shadow burned away, and the second hand kisses 10:56:15. Exactly. Perfectly. And Armstrong's voice cuts through. The Eagle has landed. The screen explodes into deep, thick static that surges out of the glass. Not light, but something cold and grainy that has texture and weight. It pulls at you, pulls the room sideways like you're standing on a deck that's tilting. The thunder goes silent mid-boom, cut off so abruptly your ears ring with the absence. The hum of electronics morphs into a tight, high-pitched whine that drills into your temples. You feel the floor shift beneath your feet, wood and tar paper becoming metal, riveted and solid. The air turns dry and filtered, all the moisture sucked out in an instant, and gravity lightens. Not gone, but reduced, like you're wearing the weight of yourself differently. The static thins into dim, cramped interior light that flickers from instrument panels. You're standing in the Eagle, squeezed into the cramped cabin between panels and straps, and equipment you don't recognize but somehow know are critical. The space is impossibly small. You could touch both walls if you stretched your arms, and the ceiling is so low you instinctively hunch. Instrument panels glow with pale green numerals and blinking indicator lights, dozens of them, each telling a story you don't have the training to read. Paper checklists float slightly in the reduced gravity, tethered, with clips to keep them from drifting. The smell is distinct. Metal and plastic and something chemical. Air that's been recycled too many times mixed with the smell of men working hard in a confined space. Armstrong and Aldrin are there. Not as images, not as recordings. There, real, three-dimensional, moving through their post-landing checklist with voices that carry the slight distortion of helmet speakers, even though their visors are up now. Armstrong's face is focused, controlled, that famous unreadable calm. Aldrin is animated by comparison, gesturing at instruments, consulting a checklist. Their voices overlap with mission control coming through on the radio, that slight delay that happens when signals travel from the moon to Earth and back. You try to move and discover you can. You take a step and Aldrin's shoulder passes through you, not like a ghost exactly, but like you're two layers of film projected over the same screen. Where he intersects your space, you feel a cold, fizzing sensation, like static on skin, and then he's past you, reaching for a switch, completely unaware. Through the small triangular window you see it. The lunar surface stretches out in shades of grey, powdery and alien, lit by harsh sunlight that throws shadows so black they look like holes in reality. The horizon is wrong, too close, curved in a way that Earth's never is. And beyond the grey there's the blackness, the real blackness of space that you've only seen in pictures, and it's so much darker than you imagined, so absolute that it seems to pull at your eyes. Earth hangs there, a tiny blue-white marble that you could cover with your thumb, swirled with clouds and impossibly bright and far away. Your chest tightens looking at it. Every person who ever lived except for these two men is on that marble. Over it all, faint and out of place, you hear another sound that doesn't belong to 1969. A distant, muffled clock ticking, like it's buried under layers of air and metal. The rooftop clock still beating in your ears even though you're 250,000 miles away and 56 years in the past. The sound anchors you, reminds you that you're still connected to that tower, that shack, that storm. You move carefully through the cabin, testing boundaries. When you try to touch a control panel, your fingers pass through it without resistance, but you feel a tingling, like touching a live wire. You can walk along the narrow gaps between equipment racks, around their shoulders, to the tiny window. Outside you can see the ladder extending down from the hatch, and beyond it the powdery regolith waiting for the first human footprint. The astronauts are discussing EVA prep now, running through procedures with Houston. Their movements are practiced, economical in the tight space. You realise you're anchored to the broadcast somehow, not just to this physical location. The audio you hear is both live, their actual voices centimetres from your ears, and a slightly delayed processed echo coming from Earth, the version being recorded and transmitted through that tower dish back in your time. The sounds layer over each other in a way that makes your head hurt if you focus on it too much. In a corner of the LM, mounted among other equipment, a small unit with a spinning reel flashes a tiny indicator light in a rhythm that almost, but not quite, matches the rooftop clock tick. You watch it for a while, trying to map the relationship. The lighthouse rhythm is close but drifting, like two metronomes that started together but are slowly moving out of sync. You understand with a cold certainty. Your stay here is limited by how long the tower's equipment can keep the transmission tuned to this specific moment. The broadcast in your time is a loop, cycling through the same events, and you're riding that loop like a signal. If the broadcast in your time drifts, jams, or cuts, if the storm damages something, if the old equipment fails, you'll start to slide along the mission timeline, forward or backward or sideways into some other version, or off it entirely, into whatever static lives between the moments. When you focus hard on the rooftop clock tick in your head, the LM lights dim slightly, as if you're leaning away from this moment, losing your grip on it. The sounds become more distant, the astronauts more translucent. When you focus instead on the astronauts' voices, on the immediate reality of the cabin, the rooftop tick recedes until it's barely audible under the hiss of the cabin air system. You practice this, learning to balance between the 2 points of attention, keeping yourself anchored in both times at once. Armstrong's at the window now, looking out at the surface. "Isn't that something?" he says quietly, almost to himself. Aldrin joins him, and they stand there for a moment in silence. Two men looking at a place no human has ever stood. You position yourself so you can see past them, see what they see. The alien landscape waiting, the experiment packages they'll deploy, the flag they'll plant. History coiled like a spring ready to release. Then a burst of radio noise cuts through, sharp and sudden, exactly like the interference you've heard in old recordings. Communications drop for a second. Armstrong and Aldrin exchange a glance, waiting for Houston to come back. But here, in this moment, you feel the interference differently. The cabin flickers. For just a heartbeat, you see an alternate panel layout. Switches in different positions, a mission patch that's the wrong colour, and then it snaps back to normal. Your stomach drops. You realise that tiny interference in the signal, storm surges back home. The age of the equipment, maybe even your own breathing too close to a microphone in the shack, can branch the signal. You're not accessing a single recorded moment, but something more complicated, more fragile. Every version of the broadcast that was ever recorded, every feed that went to every station, they're all layered here, and the interference lets you slip between them. The rooftop storm back home grows more violent. You feel it somehow, even though you can't see it. The tower swaying, rain hammering the dish, lightning striking closer. Occasionally the LM shudders with a ghost thunder that isn't lunar at all, that's coming from your time bleeding into this one. Each time it happens, you feel the moment loosen around you, like a photograph curling at the edges. The rooftop clock in your head skips, 10:56:16, then 10:56:18, then 10:56:21. Seconds vanishing, your return window shrinking with each glitch. You press yourself against the cabin wall, or where you think the wall is, and concentrate on staying present, on not sliding into one of the other versions. By focusing during a static burst, by letting your attention drift in a controlled way, you discover you can nudge which version of the broadcast you're tuned to. One shift brings different radio chatter. The same words but alternate phrasing, Armstrong's tone slightly different, more excited or more controlled depending on which branch you follow. Another shift shows a fleeting overlay of foreign captions, German or Russian, coverage that never appeared in your timeline's version, but must have existed somewhere, somewhen. Through the window, for just a breath during one of these shifts, you see a different footprint pattern outside, or maybe a future footprint, you can't tell. Boot treads in the dust arranged in a way that doesn't match the photographs you've memorised, as if someone else stepped down first in another branch of the night. The danger and the allure hit you at the same time. You could stay here, riding the signal, visiting multiple variants of the landing. You could watch history unfold a dozen different ways, see all the tiny branches where someone said something slightly different or stepped with their left foot instead of their right. But the rooftop clock doesn't branch with you. That tick is singular, absolute, coming from one specific clock in one specific tower. The heartbeat grows fainter with every drift, harder to hear under the LM systems and the astronauts' breathing. Returning will require locking onto the exact original line you came in on, and the more you drift, the harder it will be to find that line again among all the others. Armstrong begins suiting up for EVA. The cabin becomes very quiet except for the rustle of fabric, the click of helmet seals, the soft confirmations between the two men and Houston. You know what's coming. You've seen the footage 100 times, read the transcripts, watched documentaries that analysed every second. But being here, watching them prepare with the slow care of men who know they're about to step into the unknown, it's different. Their hands shake slightly. They're afraid and doing it anyway. The rooftop storm back home approaches another lightning peak. You feel it building, that same gathering charge that happened before you crossed over. In your ears, the distant thunder and the LM system's hum begin to beat together, frequencies aligning. The clock tick gets louder, more insistent. You realise this alignment, the first step, thunder, clock, is your best chance, maybe your only chance. When Armstrong steps onto the surface and says the line the whole world knows, the broadcast power will spike. Every station on Earth will be transmitting the same moment, and the signal will be at its strongest, clearest, most unified. If you don't use that resonance to anchor a path back, the tower's aging equipment might fail under the storm, or the loop might degrade, leaving you somewhere in a fading replay that gets more corrupted with each cycle until it's nothing but static and fragments. You watch Armstrong manoeuvre toward the hatch. The movements are slow, careful, practiced 1,000 times in training, but never in this exact configuration, this exact gravity. Aldrin helps him, checking seals, confirming readings. The hatch opens with a mechanical sound that you feel in your chest. Lunar vacuum beyond. Not empty space, but the faintest trace of gas, enough to carry sound if you could hear it. The return rule assembles itself in your mind like muscle memory for something you've never done. When Armstrong says the famous line and sets his boot on the moon, the cheering and noise on Earth will spike. Every radio, every television, millions of people holding their breath and then releasing it all at once. That wave of attention, of collective human focus, will pulse through the broadcast. At that exact instant, you need to step into the static, the grain you saw in the window, the space between clear signal and noise, and treat it like the mirror of the rooftop monitor. While holding both clocks in your mind, the one ticking here in the LM telemetry, and the one on the shack wall frozen at 10:56:15, the moment you crossed over. Outbound was matching the landing line to lightning and clock from your world. Return is matching the first step to the memory of that same lightning and second hand from inside this world. A circuit, closed at both ends. Armstrong descends the ladder. You move to the window, pressing close to the glass, or where the glass would be if you had substance here. Your awareness starts to split. Part of you is watching from the LM floor, part through the grainy window, part back in the tower shack, hand still on the play button. The boundaries between these positions blur. You can feel the roof gravel under your feet and the LM's metal floor at the same time. You can smell both ozone and recycled air. His boot hovers above the surface. The whole world holds its breath. Your world, this world, all the worlds. You feel the thunder in your chest, building. The rooftop clock breaks 10:56:15 again, even though that second already passed in your time, the loop cycling back to the moment of crossing. Time isn't linear here. It's layered, folded, all the moments existing at once in the space between transmission and reception. That's one small step for man, Armstrong says, and the audio quality does that strange thing where you can't quite tell if he said a man or just man, the static eating the article, or maybe he never said it. One giant leap for mankind. The boot presses into lunar dust. The grain of the transmission explodes into static in the window, a bloom of white and grey that fills your vision. You step forward into it with your eyes open, refusing to blink, holding both clocks in your mind. The one on the LM panel counting mission elapsed time, and the one in your memory, frozen at the moment of crossing. You force them to beat in unison, to sync the way you synced the landing phrase with the lightning. The grey dust becomes roof gravel under your feet, sharp-edged and real. The hiss becomes rain, individual drops hitting metal and tar paper. The LM's cramped walls expand into the shack's flaking boards, mould-spotted and water-damaged. You're standing in front of the CRT monitor, the same moment you just lived now playing out on the screen. Armstrong's boot touching down, the flag of dust, the grainy black and white footage that the whole world watched. But now it's distant, contained, a recording of something that happened a lifetime ago. Your lungs burn like you've just run a race. You're gasping, doubled over, hands on your knees. The storm still rages outside, but it feels wrong. The rhythm's slightly off from what you remember. The thunder comes a beat too late. The lightning flashes in a different pattern. When you catch your breath enough to stand, you look at the analog clock. It still hangs crooked on the wall, still ticks toward midnight. But now there's a tiny NASA worm logo stamped under the numbers, red and white, that retro 70s design. You stare at it. You're absolutely certain it wasn't there before. The clock was generic, industrial, anonymous. Now it's branded, official, like it came from a government surplus auction. On the screen, the broadcast continues. Armstrong and Aldrin move across the surface, deploying experiments, collecting samples. It looks right. It looks exactly like the footage you've seen 100 times, except the mission patch in the corner graphic is subtly different. The eagle's wings are swept at a slightly different angle. A small broadcaster logo appears in the lower right from the start, not added later in post-production. And when the famous quote replays, the closed caption reads, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." With the article, definitive. Like it was always clearly said that way, and only conspiracy theorists and audio engineers ever suggested otherwise. You fumble for your phone with shaking hands. The battery is almost dead, drained by something, though you had a full charge when you climbed the tower. The search results for Apollo 11 load slowly, over the weak signal. The first image is the mission patch, and it matches the one you just saw on the screen. Eagle wings swept at that slightly different angle. The quote in the top result includes the article without any annotation about controversy or static. The documentaries you find all confidently state that Armstrong said, "a man," and always did. The world insists it's always been this way. Every page, every video, every poster and textbook and memorial. The version you remember, the ambiguous audio, the missing article, the decades of debate, exists only in your head now. You've brought back a different moon landing, one where the transmission was slightly clearer, where history recorded itself with just a bit more certainty. You sit on the shack's floor, back against the wall, and stare at the monitor. The broadcast plays on, the loop cycling through the same 6 hours of coverage. The storm gradually weakens outside, thunder retreating into the distance. By the time dawn starts to grey the eastern sky, you're still sitting there, watching two men walk on a moon that might not be quite the same moon you learned about as a child. Nights afterward, when thunderstorms roll through the city, you feel an itch to climb back up the tower. The building management has posted new signs: danger, structural instability, and roof access prohibited. But the padlock on the access door is still broken. You could go up, you could try again, watch the landing from a different angle, tune into another variant, bring back a version where the flag doesn't blow in the non-existent wind, or where Aldrin steps out first, or where they speak different words that still somehow become immortal. You replay the landing footage at home, downloaded from YouTube, ripped from streaming services, pulled from a documentary torrent. Each time you watch, you feel a phantom sway, like the LM's gentle rocking under lunar gravity. Your inner ear insists you're moving even though you're still. Sometimes you close your eyes and you're back in that cramped cabin, watching history assemble itself from checklists and courage. The weirdest part is the moon itself. When it hangs low over the city, full and bright, you look at it, and something is wrong. The Maria, the dark patches that make the man in the moon face, are positioned slightly off from where you remember. The Sea of Tranquility is in the right general area, but its shape doesn't quite match your mental map. You've looked at the moon your whole life, learned the features, memorized the landing sites. Now your eyes slide off it like water off glass. Your attention can't decide which map is correct, the one in your memory or the one in the sky. You know the rule still works. The tower is still there, the dish still points at nothing, the shack still smells like ozone and age. The equipment still functions, held together by momentum and rust, and whatever strange physics lets a broadcast tower reach through time. Sync the landing words to lightning and the second hand, step through the static, and you can stand inside the moment where humanity first touched another world. But you also know the cost now. Each crossing leaves another fingerprint on your reality. Small logo, different phrase, altered textbook. You're eroding your own timeline, sanding it down like weathered rock, replacing the history you knew with versions that are almost but not quite the same. Do it enough times, and you might find yourself in a world where no one remembers the version of the moon you were born under. You'd be the only person walking around with memories that don't match any documentary, any photograph, any official record. You'd be a ghost from a timeline that no longer exists, living in a world that was never quite yours to begin with. Some nights you stand at your apartment window, looking up at the moon, wrong moon, right moon, you can't tell anymore, and you think about Armstrong and Aldrin up there, frozen forever in that moment of arrival, still working through checklists, still preparing for that first step, still standing at the threshold between what was and what would be. You could visit them again, watch them from different angles, from different broadcasts, through the eyes of different cameras that saw the same moment from slightly different perspectives. The rule is simple. The execution is just a matter of timing and attention, and willing yourself to believe that static can be a door. Lightning flashes over your city most summer nights. The clock still ticks toward 10:56 and 15 every night, crossing that threshold twice, once in the evening, once in the morning. The tower waits, patient as history, holding the signal in its rusting arms. You haven't gone back yet, haven't climbed the ladder in 3 weeks. But the itch is there, constant, like tinnitus or phantom limb pain. The knowledge that you could step sideways out of this moment and into that one, could watch the impossible become real over and over again in infinite variation. All you have to do is match the rhythm, landing to lightning to clock, and refuse to blink. The moon rises over the city tonight, and it's still wrong, still slightly off in ways you can't quite articulate. The Maria catch the light differently. The terminator between light and dark falls in an unfamiliar pattern. You look away before the wrongness makes you dizzy. Tomorrow maybe. Tomorrow if it storms, if the lightning builds to that same crackling peak, if the wind is right and the tower calls. Tomorrow you might climb back up, sync the broadcast one more time, step through the static into that cramped metal cabin where two men in bulky suits are forever preparing to make the first footprint in alien dust. You might bring back a version where things are clearer, where history recorded itself with more certainty, where the transmission came through perfect and unambiguous. Or you might bring back something stranger, this landing where everything went wrong but somehow worked anyway, where they spoke different words or planted a different flag or saw something in the black sky that made them pause. Each version would be real, each would become the official history, the one everyone learns in school, the one that exists in textbooks and museums and collective memory. And only you would carry the ghost of all the other versions, all the other first steps, all the other moonscapes that might have been. The storm builds outside your window, lightning flickers between buildings, illuminating the city in freeze frames. You check the clock, almost 10:56, almost time. The tower waits, the moon hangs wrong in the sky. And somewhere in the static between transmission and reception, between the moment that was and the moment that could be, Armstrong and Aldrin are still there, forever preparing to step into history, while you decide whether to watch them do it again for the first time. The thunder rolls closer and you're already reaching for your jacket before you consciously decide to go. Your hands know what they're doing even as your mind tries to talk you out of it. It's dangerous. It's eroding your reality. Each crossing peels away another layer of the world you knew, replacing it with something that's almost right, but fundamentally alien in ways you can't explain to anyone else. How do you tell someone that the moon is wrong? How do you explain that history happened differently than it does now? But your feet are already moving, carrying you down the apartment stairs, out into the wet streets. The rain hasn't started yet, but you can smell it coming, that electric ozone smell that's become synonymous in your mind with crossing over. The city feels empty at this hour, just past 10:30 on a Tuesday night. The bars are still open, but the streets are quiet, everyone driven inside by the approaching storm. You move through puddles of streetlight and shadow, heading toward the old industrial district where the tower rises like a skeletal finger pointing at nothing. The building is more derelict than you remember. Has it only been 3 weeks? The plywood over the ground floor windows has new graffiti, territorial tags and crude declarations. The chain link fence has been cut wider, the gap now big enough to walk through without turning sideways. You slip inside and stand in the lobby, letting your eyes adjust. The mailboxes on the wall are empty, their little doors hanging open like mouths. Something scurries in the walls, rats probably, or maybe just the building settling into its own decay. The stairwell smells like urine and mould. You take the stairs 2 at a time, your footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. Your heart is already racing and you haven't even reached the ladder yet. Part of you wonders if this is addiction, this need to go back. Not to the moon itself, but to that moment of transition, that sensation of the world tilting and reality becoming negotiable. The static that pulls you through feels like the most honest thing you've ever experienced. Pure signal, pure information, unfiltered by interpretation or memory, or the slow degradation of recorded media. The roof access ladder is slicker than last time, rain from earlier storms having left a film of algae on the metal rungs. You climb carefully, testing each grip before committing your weight. The city spreads below you, a circuit board of lights and motion. From up here you can see the highway cutting through downtown, headlights flowing in rivers of white and red. You can see the old stadium, dark and empty, waiting for demolition. You can see all the way to the hills on the eastern edge, where the expensive houses perch like spectators watching the city eat itself. The tower roof is how you left it. The satellite dish still pointed at the same empty coordinates, the shack door still hanging slightly open. But something feels different. The air is heavier, more charged. The lightning is building faster than it did before, flashes coming every 10 seconds now, illuminating the underside of the cloud layer in shades of purple and white. You check your phone. 10:51. 5 minutes until the moment. Plenty of time to set up, to find the rhythm, to sync yourself with the broadcast. Inside the shack, the CRT monitor is already on. You're certain you turned it off last time, but the screen glows with that blue-grey light of an active display waiting for input. The frozen title card is there. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 Live. But now there's something else. A second line of text below it, added in a different font, slightly pixelated like it was inserted digitally after the fact. Transmission 7 of Your Skin Goes Cold. 7. You've only crossed over once, unless the count isn't personal, unless it's tracking every crossing that's ever happened, every person who's ever figured out the rule and climbed this tower and synced themselves to the landing. How many others have there been? How many versions of reality are walking around the city right now, each one carrying a slightly different moon, a slightly different history? The clock on the wall still has that NASA logo you don't remember. The second hand sweeps past the 12 and begins its climb toward 10:56:15. You have maybe 4 minutes. Your hands move automatically, rewinding the tape, finding the right position in the broadcast. The audio spools backward, Armstrong's voice in reverse, mission control's confirmations inverted into nonsense syllables. You've done this before. You know the timing now, can feel it in your bones, but something stops you. Your finger hovers over the play button and you look at the note scrawled on the console. Sync. Eagle has landed. Dustin's flash. Plus. 10:56:15. Do not blink. And you notice something new. Below it, in different handwriting, someone has added, return is not guaranteed. Each crossing costs. Count the cost. Who wrote that? When? You. Were just here 3 weeks ago and it wasn't there then. Or was it? Your memory feels slippery, unreliable. Maybe it was always there and you just didn't notice, too focused on the mechanics of crossing to pay attention to warnings. Or maybe someone else has been here since your last visit. Maybe you're not alone in this. Maybe there's a whole community of timeline refugees, people who've crossed over so many times they don't even remember which version of reality they started in. The lightning flashes outside and you count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi before the thunder arrives. It's getting closer. You check the monitor, check the clock, check the sky through the grimy window. Everything is aligning. The conditions are perfect. Better than perfect. The storm is more organised than last time, the lightning more regular. It's like the universe is conspiring to make this crossing as easy as possible. But that thought makes you pause. Why would it be easy? Why would the universe want you to do this? Unless it's not the universe but something else. Some mechanism you don't understand. Some system that benefits from people sliding between timelines and bringing back slightly altered versions of history. What if you're not discovering a phenomenon but participating in one? What if every crossing, every alteration serves some purpose you can't see? The clock hits 10:54. 2 minutes. You have to decide now. Go through with it or walk away. Stay in this version of reality with its wrong moon and its slightly off mission patch, or cross over again and bring back another variation. Stack another layer of altered history onto your increasingly unstable relationship with consensus reality. Your hands are shaking as you position your finger over the play button. The storm is directly overhead now, the thunder and lightning almost simultaneous. The whole tower sways slightly in the wind, metal creaking, cables singing. Through the window you can see the satellite dish trembling, rain starting to needle across its rusted surface. The city below looks unreal from up here, too distant to be the same place where you live and work and pretend to be normal. You think about Armstrong and Aldrin in that cramped cabin, going through their checklists with steady voices even though they knew they might die up there. They might run out of oxygen. The ascent engine might fail. A micrometeorite might puncture the hull. They might be stranded 250,000 miles from home with no way back and nothing to do but wait for the air to run out while the whole world watched. But they went anyway. They committed to the crossing. 10:55. 1 minute. You start the playback, listening to the familiar cadence of mission control voices, the overlapping radio chatter, the building tension toward landing. Your eyes track between the monitor, the clock, and the window where lightning illuminates the storm clouds from within. You can feel your heartbeat in your throat, in your fingertips, syncing with the clock's second hand as it sweeps upward. The phrase approaches. You don't blink, you barely breathe. Tranquility base here. Lightning flashes white across the entire sky, so bright it hurts. and the second hand touches 10:56:15, and Armstrong's voice cuts through perfectly. The Eagle has landed. But this time something is different. The static that blooms from the screen doesn't just pull, it tears. Reality rips like fabric, the edges jagged and wrong. You feel yourself being yanked forward not smoothly but in juddering frames, like a film with half the frames missing. The thunder doesn't cut off but fragments into overlapping echoes, each one from a slightly different storm. The floor becomes metal but also stays wood, both surfaces existing simultaneously under your feet, until the contradiction resolves with a sensation like vertigo. You're in the LM but it's wrong. The cabin is the same but different. Armstrong and Aldrin are there but their suits are a different shade of white, slightly more ivory than you remember. The instrument panels have additional switches, or maybe fewer. You can't tell because every time you try to focus on a specific control it shifts, flickers, stabilizes into a slightly different configuration. Through the window, the lunar surface looks right, but Earth is in the wrong position, too high in the frame, or maybe the window itself is mounted at a different angle. Your head pounds with the contradictions. This isn't like last time. Last time the crossing was clean, the moment stable. This time it feels like you've arrived at a junction of multiple timelines, several versions of the landing occupying the same space. Armstrong's voice overlaps with another Armstrong's voice. Same words but slightly different intonation. Aldrin moves past you, but you see three versions of him simultaneously, displaced from each other by inches, like a photograph of someone moving with a slow shutter speed. The rooftop clock in your head is ticking, but it's irregular now, skipping and jumping. 10:56, 15, 10:56, 17, 10:56, 14, 10:56, 22. The rhythm is chaotic. You try to focus, to anchor yourself to one version of the moment, but every time you think you've stabilized, another surge of interference splinters the reality again. Through the window you see the lunar surface and notice something that makes your stomach drop. There are footprints already, multiple sets, crisscrossing in patterns that don't match any mission you know. Some are boot prints like Armstrong's, but others are different, too large or too small, or with tread patterns that look wrong. And beyond those, further out near a crater's rim, you see something that can't be there. A second LM, this one painted with markings you don't recognise, sitting at an angle like it made a hard landing. This isn't just alternate history, this is convergence. Multiple timelines bleeding together, occupying the same moment. You've crossed over into a junction point where several versions of the landing are happening simultaneously, and your presence, your observation, is collapsing them into an increasingly unstable hybrid. Armstrong is at the hatch now, preparing to descend, but his movements are glitching. He reaches for a handle and his hand is there, then 6 inches to the left, then there again, like a video buffering. His voice comes through the radio in fragments, going to step. Now. One small. The famous phrase is breaking apart, arriving out of sequence. You realise with growing horror that you can't stay here. This moment is too unstable, too corrupted by interference. If you wait for the first step to make your return jump, you might end up anywhere, or nowhere, lost in the static between versions, a consciousness without a timeline to anchor to. But if you leave now, before the crossing completes, what comes back with you? What version of history do you drag into your reality when the moment itself can't decide what it is? The tower back home, you can feel it through the chaos, that distant anchor point, is struggling. The storm is worse than you anticipated. You sense rather than see the lightning striking close to the dish, electricity arcing through old cables, the monitor in the shack flickering. Your connection is degrading. The rooftop clock skips wildly now. 10:56:45, 10:56:02, 10:57:33, 10:56:15 again. You have seconds to decide. Stay and risk becoming unmoored from any timeline, or jump now through degraded conditions and bring back God's know what version of history. Armstrong's boot touches the ladder, or maybe it doesn't. The moment keeps resetting, looping, fragmenting. Through the window you see Earth flicker between positions, between sizes, between slightly different cloud patterns. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Rainwater snakes down tiled walls and drips from the ceiling as you stand on a nearly empty underground platform. The LED clock over the track stutters between 2:24 and 2:25. flickering like a tired eye. Fluorescence hums and buzzes overhead, casting sickly light across the wet concrete. You've been waiting 40 minutes for a train that should have come 35 minutes ago, watching each passing minute dissolve into the next, with the slow drip of water from cracked tile. A late train rattles through without stopping, wind pushing damp air into your face. The gust carries the smell of oil and ozone, and in that brief moment of chaos, papers swirling, your jacket whipping against your body, you spot something you've never noticed before. A narrow stairwell tucked behind a support column at the far end of the platform. Bare concrete steps descending into darkness. No sign, no warning tape, no authorised personnel only placard. Just a faint green glow at the bottom, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Your phone has no service. It hasn't for the last 10 minutes, the signal bars vanishing one by one, as if something below is drinking them. The rain sounds filter down the stairwell, mixing with a low mechanical hum from below. You glance at the stuttering clock, 2:24, 2:25, 2:24, and something about that broken rhythm pulls you forward. Your footsteps echo as you cross the platform, each one louder than it should be in the empty station. The stairwell is older than the platform above. The concrete is poured differently, rougher, with a kind of texture that suggests hands mixed the aggregate decades before modern codes existed. The green glow grows brighter as you descend, resolving into emergency lighting that looks both ancient and somehow wrong. The bulbs encased in fixtures you don't recognise. 15 steps down, the mechanical hum becomes clearer. Not the hum of modern machinery, but something deeper, more resonant, like the sound a massive engine makes when it's coasting rather than working. The hidden platform is smaller, older. Brick arches curve overhead, their mortar crumbling in places to reveal older brick beneath, and older brick beneath that, layers of city stacked like sediment. A single track runs through the centre, and on it waits one train. Not a modern subway car with its smooth panels and automated announcements, but something in between. Old bones dressed in newer skin. The cars are rounded like vintage rolling stock, but wrapped in dark metal that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. The doors are closed, the windows are dark. Above the train, a destination board flickers, but it doesn't show a time. No 2:47 arrival or 3:15 departure. Only 4 words in dim orange letters. Departure, year 3025. You stare at those words long enough that they begin to feel like a trick of tired eyes, but they don't change, they don't flicker into sense. Year 3025, as if a subway could travel through time instead of tunnels, as if destination meant something other than distance and direction. A ticket machine stands alone against the brick wall, its design straddling eras like the train. An old mechanical body with a digital screen grafted onto its face. A single ticket protrudes from the slot, already printed, the paper slightly curled at the edges as if it's been waiting for you. Your full name is etched onto it, perfectly spelled. Not the shortened version you use at coffee shops or the nickname your friends default to, but your complete legal name, every middle initial, every syllable that appeared on your birth certificate. Below that, platform B- and valid at 2:25 only. And below that, in smaller print that you have to squint to read, departure synchronized to origin convergence. The ticket is warm in your hand. Not hot, but body warm, as if someone just held it. You turn it over and find more text on the back. Rule. When clocks strike 2:25, yes, read your full name as printed. No earlier, no later, one breath. Through the train's dark windows you can see the platform clocks. 3 of them mounted at intervals along the brick wall. All of them are struggling with 2:25, the digits flickering between 2:24, 59 and 2:25, and sometimes stuttering backward to 2:24, 58, like they can't quite decide which moment they're in. Like 2:25 is a minute that doesn't want to exist. A metallic voice whispers from a speaker hidden somewhere in the arches, distorted by static and distance but clear enough to understand. Rule when the clocks strike 2:25. Cass, read your full name from the ticket. No earlier, no later, one breath. The voice doesn't repeat. The platform falls back into silence, broken only by the hum and the distant sound of rain filtering down from somewhere above, or maybe below. The acoustics down here make direction meaningless. You watch the clocks through the window, testing yourself against their rhythm. Your heart begins to sink to the ticks, counting the seconds that loop and stutter. 2, 24, 57, 58, 59, back to 57, forward to 59. Holding on, 59 for 3 seconds, then 00, then back to 58. The pattern isn't quite random. It's searching. The clocks are feeling their way towards something, and you realise with a chill that runs down your spine that they're waiting for you to be ready. You step closer to the nearest carriage. The doors remain closed, but through the dark glass you can see the interior, dimly lit by the same green emergency lighting. Empty seats upholstered in material that might be leather or might be something else. Straps hanging from overhead rails swaying slightly, even though there's no breeze. The train feels like it's breathing, like it's alive in the way that old ships are alive, aware of their passengers through the creak of their boards and the shift of their weight on water. You test the door. It doesn't budge. The ticket grows warmer in your hand. The clocks flicker faster now. 2:24, 57, 58, 59, 00, 59, 00, 59, 0, settling into a pattern, building towards something. Your breath catches in your throat as you realise this is it. The moment is compressing, reality narrowing toward a single second where the impossible becomes possible, where a train can leave for a destination 1,000 years away. You inhale. The clocks hit 2:25 as across all 3 displays simultaneously. They're flickering, suddenly synchronised, suddenly certain. And in that moment of certainty, you speak your full name exactly as printed on the ticket, every syllable clear, the entire thing contained in a single breath that tastes like ozone and rain. Every carriage light snaps off at once. The darkness is absolute, the kind of black that only exists underground where no light has ever reached naturally. You feel the train shift beneath you. No, you feel yourself shift relative to the train, as if gravity just changed its mind about which way is down. The brakes sigh like something exhaling, a long mechanical breath that sounds almost relieved. Rails hum underfoot, not with electricity, but with something else. Some other energy cooling from 1,000 journeys, or building toward one more. In the darkness, you hear a distant thunder of rain and a new hum, lower, heavier, felt in your chest rather than heard with your ears. The sound of deep time moving, the sound of years being crossed like subway stops. When the door seals unlatch with a soft hiss and the lights slowly return, the signage has changed. The orange letters now read Arrival, Year 3025. The platform beyond the glass is cracked, overgrown with something that might be moss but glows faintly blue. The brick arches are still there, but they're stitched with glowing conduits and pulsing filaments, old infrastructure kept alive by technology that didn't exist in your century. The doors open, you step out into year 3025. The hidden platform is now a ruin wrapped in tech. The brick and rusted steel you saw a moment ago, or 1,000 years ago, are still present, but they're networked now, connected by cables and light pipes that pulse with data or power or something in between. Catwalks hang overhead like spider webs made of cable, and you can see small devices scuttling along them, maintaining connections that keep this place functioning. The ceiling still leaks, but the water is caught mid-drip in thin blue stasis fields that hum softly. A city that patched gravity before it fixed the roof. On the far wall, a giant display shows a schematic of a single, looping subway line. Every branch is greyed out, every connection severed, except for one bright ring labelled in a language you don't know. The characters shift and flow like they're not quite settled into their shapes yet, still deciding what they mean. A tiny icon of your train pulses on the loop, moving slowly around the circuit. Alone. The last train on the last line beneath a city that no longer remembers your century. A maintenance drone trundles past. On 4 spindly legs, its body a collection of mismatched parts held together by purpose rather than design. It pauses near you, flickering a light pattern that feels almost like a question. Blue, green, blue, pause, blue, green, before deciding you're not its concern and continuing on its rounds. The sound of its legs on the platform is oddly comforting, a reminder that this place, however strange, still follows rules, still has routines. You walk along the platform, your footsteps echoing differently than they should. The acoustics have changed, or maybe your ears have changed. Maybe crossing 1,000 years does something to the way you hear the world. The air tastes different too, cleaner somehow, but with an underlying metallic tang like you're breathing inside a machine. Near what might have been a station attendant's booth in your time, you find a glass kiosk sealed by age and neglect. Its interior is filled with yellowed paper, rusted punch tools, and a holographic projector half buried in dust. When your ticket slips from your pocket onto the counter, and you're not entirely sure it slipped, or if your fingers simply let it go, the projector flickers alive. A hollow, glitching clerk avatar materializes above the dust. It's humanoid in the way that mannequins are humanoid. All the right parts in roughly the right places, but nothing that suggests actual humanity. Its voice comes from everywhere and nowhere, reconstructed from fragments of recorded announcements. Outbound passage, read your full registered name at the instant your origin clocks converge on the departure minute. Inbound passage, return to your origin platform and read your name as registered in memory, not in ink, at the instant both centuries strike the same second. The avatar's face glitches, pixels scattering and reforming. It continues. Warning. Each crossing decays your alignment with your native timestamp. Memory will choose a century before the clocks do. Then it freezes, caught mid-gesture, and slowly fades. But those words hang in the air like smoke, like a smell you can't quite place. Memory will choose a century before the clocks do. You realise the rule isn't just about the ticket, it's about how tightly you remember who you are and when you belong. The ticket was just a tool to focus that memory, to anchor you to a specific moment. But memory is mutable. Memory shifts. And if your memory starts to believe you belong here, in 3025, then the clocks will agree. You pocket the ticket carefully and return to the platform. The train waits with doors open, patient as stone. You step aboard. The interior is exactly as you glimpsed it before. Green emergency lighting, empty seats, swaying straps. But now you can see the details. The seats are upholstered in something that looks like leather, but shifts slightly under your gaze, as if it's watching you back. The advertisements above the windows are in that same flowing script you saw on the station. Schematic, but some of them flicker into languages you recognise for brief moments. English, others you don't know, and then back to the dominant script, settling like sediment. You sit. The seat moulds to you, adjusting in small ways that are too subtle to be comfortable and too noticeable to ignore. The train lurches into motion without announcement, without the usual surge of acceleration. It simply begins to move, as if it was always moving and only now decided to let you notice. The first station arrives quickly. The doors whisper open onto a platform-turned hydroponic farm, where bioluminescent vines climb old posters advertising movies you've never heard of and events that happened centuries ago or haven't happened yet. You can't tell which. The vines pulse with soft light, blue, green, purple, and you realise they're growing in patterns, deliberate arrangements that might be art or might be data storage or might be both. A single figure tends them in the distance, too far away to call out to, wearing something that might be a hazard suit or might be their skin. The doors close before you can decide whether to get off. The train moves on. The next station is a plaza station, its platform expanded into a vast space filled with holographic pedestrians, replaying a crowd that no longer exists. They walk their paths endlessly, checking phones that aren't there, greeting friends who are somewhere else in the loop, waiting for trains that will never come. The detail is perfect. You can see their clothes, their hairstyles, the brands on their shopping bags. They're from a dozen different eras, all mixed together in this frozen moment of movement. The greatest hits of human transit, preserved like insects in amber. A maintenance hub comes next, where the only staff are disembodied voices announcing delays on lines that were shut down centuries ago. The Blue Line is experiencing service interruptions due to temporal anomalies originating in the 2000s. Please avoid unauthorized temporal boarding procedures. The voice is calm, professional, reading from a script that assumes everyone knows what temporal boarding procedures are and why they need authorization. Everywhere, the announcements reference earlier eras like myths or system bugs. You catch fragments as the train moves through. Legacy infrastructure from the 2100s being integrated with modern systems, If you encounter passengers from discontinued timelines, please report to station management. Due to ongoing repairs to causal flow, some destinations may arrive before you depart. You catch your reflection in a cracked security panel. You look the same. Same face, same clothes, still damp from the rain you left behind 1,000 years ago. But the timestamp in the corner of the panel reads 3025-02-25. 02.25. The system has tagged you, logged you, decided when you are even if you're not sure yourself. The train completes its loop and returns to the hidden platform. You step off, needing to feel solid ground, needing to think. Your phone is in your hand before you realise you've reached for it. The screen shows 2:25 a.m, but the date is a mess of digits, cycling between your year and 3025 faster than you can read. Apps crash when they try to fetch current data. The weather app opens and closes and opens again, stuck in a loop of trying to tell you if it's raining in a century that doesn't have your city anymore, or has a different version of it, or has something else entirely where your city used to be. You try to call someone, anyone, but the phone doesn't even attempt to connect. It just displays no temporal anchor where the signal bars should be. A station AI, its interface projected onto a wall of ancient tile, notices your confusion. "Welcome, registered commuter. How may I assist with your journey?" Its voice is warmer than the Clark avatar, almost human, but with an edge that suggests it's performing humanity rather than experiencing it. "I need to get back," you say. "Back to my time, my year." Understood. You wish to return to home station. The interface ripples, displaying route options, but every route starts with home station unknown. The AI continues, unbothered by this impossibility. Please note that temporal routes require synchronized departure windows. The next available window occurs at the dual 2:25, approximately 47 minutes from current local time. Dual 2:25? The moment when both your origin timeline and this timeline experience 2:25 simultaneously, a convergence point. All temporal commuters are advised to board 10 minutes prior to ensure proper positioning. The interface flickers. Your temporal alignment is currently at 73%. Please remain aware of your origin identity to maintain viable return authorization. You look down at your ticket. The text blurs every time you look away and back, the letters of your name swimming briefly, rearranging into unfamiliar spellings. The first letter of your first name shifts to something that looks almost but not quite right. A character from that flowing script that resembles the letter you know, but carries a weight that feels wrong in your mouth when you try to pronounce it. What happens if my alignment drops too low? Insufficient alignment results in classification as a native temporal resident. You would be welcomed as a permanent member of the 3025 community. The AI's tone suggests this is a positive outcome. Many temporal tourists choose to stay. The integration process is smooth and well supported. That's not what I want. Preference noted. To maintain alignment, regularly recall details specific to your origin timeline, personal memories, sensory experiences, identity markers. The return rule requires you to speak your name from memory, not from documentation. Practice recommended. You close your eyes and speak your name aloud, the full version, exactly as you remember your parents saying it when they were proud of you or angry with you or just needed you to pay attention. Each syllable is a stone you can stand on, a marker that says, "This is who I was, this is who I am." When you open your eyes, the ticket text is clearer. Not perfect, but clearer. The rain you hear is no longer just the storm from home. It's a layered sound now, past storm, future storm, and something like static between them, blending into a single ceiling of noise that seems to come from the walls themselves. The city above is crying, or the city below is weeping, or the space between centuries is leaking, and the sound of it fills every hollow space, until you can't tell if the rain is outside or inside or just in your head. You board the train again, needing to move, needing to understand the loop before you try to break it. The doors close behind you with a sigh that sounds almost disappointed. The train begins its circuit. This time you pay closer attention to the pattern. The loop takes exactly 40 minutes to complete. Each station is marked with a timestamp, not a clock time, but a date, a year, and you realise the stations are arranged chronologically. The hydroponic platform is from 2847. The plaza station with its holographic crowd is 2653. The maintenance hub is 3112. The loop doesn't follow spatial geography. It follows temporal geography. stops in time rather than space, and you're riding a train that treats centuries like crosstown distances. Station displays begin flashing sync window approaching, in those flowing symbols you inexplicably understand now. Not because you've learned the language, but because the longer you're here, the more this place settles into your perception as normal, as known as home. You feel your thoughts racing as if your brain is trying to keep pace with the clocks, trying to exist in two moments simultaneously. A recorded announcement plays through the carriage, the voice calm and mechanical. Passengers intending to return to their original chronological reference must be at hidden platform when the dual 225 strikes. Names must be clear and unfractured. Temporal services reminds you that identity coherence is a passenger's responsibility. Safe travels through the years. You worry that your name, the anchor, is already starting to fracture. When you try to recall your address, you see two versions. The apartment you left from, and another place, cleaner, higher up, with windows that show a sky you don't recognise. When you try to remember your job, your mind offers you options like a multiple-choice question where all the answers feel equally true and false. The train completes another loop. 20 minutes until the dual 225, the hidden platform comes into view, and you force yourself to get off, to stand still, to remember. The platform has changed since you arrived, or you're noticing things you missed before, more conduits now, more warning signs in languages that shift between familiar and alien. The display with the loop. Schematic shows your train icon pulsing, and now it has a number beside it, 73%. Your alignment percentage displayed for anyone to see, or maybe just for you to see. Maybe the display is personal, a mirror for your memory. You pull out your ticket. Your name is there, but the letters are fighting themselves, trying to become something else. You close your eyes and remember. Remember being 5 years old and learning to spell your name for the first time, each letter a victory. Remember your first day of school, your name on the attendance sheet. Remember job applications and wedding invitations and that one barista who always spelled it wrong, and you never corrected them because you were too polite or too tired. Remember every time someone said your name with love or anger or simple recognition. Remember who you are. The ticket stabilizes, the letters settle, you breathe. The clock over the tracks splits into two timers, one counting down to 225 in your origin year, one counting down to 225 in 3025. They move at different speeds, seconds lasting different lengths, as if time itself is elastic, and each century measures it differently. But they're converging, the two countdowns spiralling toward each other like water down a drain. 10 minutes, 5 minutes. The platform begins to glitch, showing two versions of itself overlapping, the future version with its conduits and warnings, and an older version, your version, with its cracked tiles and stuttering clocks. You can see graffiti from your time superimposed over future maintenance codes. Someone's phone number scrawled across a warning about causal flow disruption. A moment where past and future are trying to occupy the same space. 3 minutes. The train doors open even though the train hasn't moved. You step into the doorway, 1 foot in the carriage, 1 foot on the platform existing in the space between. Through the windows you can see both platforms now, flickering back and forth like a film reel missing frames. Your origin station with its damp concrete and tired commuters. The future station with its drone and bioluminescent vines creeping down from somewhere above. 1 minute. The timers accelerate, seconds tumbling over each other in their rush toward convergence. You close your eyes. The ticket is in your pocket, but you're not reading from it. You're reading from memory, from the deep storage of self where your name has been written, since before you learned language, since before you understood that names were how people kept track of each other across time. 30 seconds, 20, 10. The sounds layer, past rain and future rain, and the hum of the train, and the sigh of brakes and voices from both centuries calling out their destinations. 5, 4, 3. The clocks strike their moment, both timers hitting 225 simultaneously, and in that instant you speak your full name exactly as you remember it, every syllable steady, every letter chosen from the version of you that existed before tonight, before this impossible journey, before you knew that time could be crossed like city blocks. Your voice echoes twice. One echo is deeper, metallic, the sound processed by a century of technology. One echo is muffled by rain, organic, human, small. The train brakes sigh. All lights die again, past and future plunging into darkness simultaneously, and you fall through the gap between them. When the glow returns, you're back on the damp, half-deserted origin platform. The hidden stairway is behind you, its green glow already fading. The future train is gone. The old clock struggles but holds steady at 2:26 a.m, no longer stuttering, no longer stuck. The rain sounds like normal rain now, just water falling from the sky in the middle of the night. Nothing more meaningful than weather. Your hands are shaking. Your phone is in your hand and you check it without thinking. A reflex, a way to anchor yourself to the familiar. The year is correct. You made it back. You're home. The date is today's date. The time is 2:26 a.m. and every app opens normally, pulling data from servers that exist in your century, showing you a world you recognize. Relief floods through you, warm and dizzying. You did it. You followed the rule. You kept your name clear. You made it back across 1,000 years to the moment you left. The hidden stairway will probably vanish now, seal itself up, become just another urban legend about the subway system, about weird things that happen late at night when you're tired and alone and the trains aren't running on schedule. But then you notice. Your phone's clock says 2:26 a.m. You check again. Still 2:26 a.m. You wait, watching the seconds tick past 20, 30, 40 and check again. 2:26 a.m. The time isn't moving. Or it's moving but jumping back, caught in its own loop, unable to progress past this moment. You lock the phone and unlock it, and the time flickers. 2:26, 2:25, 2:26, 2:25, settling back on 2:25 with the stubborn insistence of a needle finding true north. The subway app on your phone is updated while you weren't looking. When you open it, there's a new line on the map. A circular route with no label, no stations marked. Just a loop that sits in the corner of the screen like a watermark. You try to tap it, but nothing happens. You close the app and open it again, and sometimes the loop is there and sometimes it's gone, as if it exists only when you're not looking directly at it. A new service announcement plays through the platform speakers, crackling with distance. Legacy infrastructure modernization will affect the circular route on an ongoing basis. Passengers may experience temporal overlap during transition periods. Thank you for your patience as we integrate earlier era systems. You look around the platform. The other passengers, the few who are here this late, don't react to the announcement. They're looking at their phones or sleeping against poles or staring into space with the 1,000-yard stare of people who ride the subway too late at night and have seen too many strange things to be surprised by one more. None of them seem to have heard it. Or maybe they heard it, but dismissed it as background noise, the kind of meaningless transit announcement that you learn to filter out after years of commuting. But you heard it, you understood it, and when you close your eyes, you can still hear the hum of that deeper engine, the sound of the last train moving beneath a dying city, running its eternal loop through stations that map time instead of space. Over the next few days, you try to return to normal. You go to work, you meet friends, you do laundry and buy groceries and do all the things that make up a life in your century. But 2:25 keeps finding you, not just at night, though that's when it's worst, but throughout the day. 2:25 p.m. arrives and your devices all pause for just a moment, syncing to something unseen. And whenever it's 2:25 in the afternoon or in the deepest part of night, you feel a gentle sway under your feet, as if standing on a moving carriage. The floor of your apartment shifts imperceptibly. The ground beneath the sidewalk hums with rail song. The world rocks like you're still riding that impossible loop. Rain on the street sounds like it's coming from underground now. You'll be walking home and hear it, not from the sky where weather happens, but from beneath the pavement, as if the storm is happening in the tunnels, as if the city below is crying its own tears independent of the city above. Sometimes, in the reflection on a subway window, any line, any time of day, you catch a faint outline of yourself in different clothes, cleaner clothes, simpler, the kind of minimal, functional garments that suggest a future where fashion has given way to pure utility. And behind that reflection self, you can see a cracked, overgrown platform labelled with symbols you're starting to recognise. Not your platform, not your century, but close, always close, bleeding through the glass like a double exposure photograph. You keep the ticket in your wallet, tucked behind your driver's license where you'll see it every day. Its printing is half faded now, the text ghosting away except for your name, which stays sharp whenever you choose to read it slowly, whenever you need to anchor yourself to who you were before you knew about the last subway. The ticket is a reminder, a talisman, a warning and a promise both. At night, when you doze off to the sound of rain and distant trains, you dream of loops, endless circles through time, stations that are museums and farms and plazas where crowds that no longer exist walk their eternal routes. You dream of the maintenance drone with its questioning lights, of the AI that wanted to help you find home station, of the Clark avatar frozen mid-gesture in a kiosk full of dust. You dream of the rule and the return rule and the warning that memory chooses, before clocks do, and you know the return rule still works. You tested it, you proved it, which means the opposite is also true. The outbound rule still works too. The hidden stairwell may appear on any platform where the clocks misbehave around 2:25. Any platform, any night, anywhere the infrastructure is old enough or strange enough or broken enough to let the centuries overlap. The last subway in year 3025 is still running somewhere below your city, waiting. The loop continues. The train makes its circuit through temporal stations, carrying passengers who may or may not know they're travelling through time instead of space. And every time the clocks converge on 2:25, a door opens, a choice presents itself. Stay in the century that raised you, with all its familiar comforts and known problems, or step through into a future that's already trying to claim your name. You check your phone. It's 2:25 a.m. You've been lying awake for hours, listening to rain that isn't quite rain, feeling the sway of rails that aren't quite there. Your apartment feels like a carriage sometimes, suspended between stations, and you can't tell if you're moving forward through your life or just circling the same loop over and over, counting the same stops in the same order, watching the same holographic crowds walk their eternal paths. Your name feels clear tonight, solid. You remember it exactly, but you also remember that other version of yourself you glimpsed in the window reflection, wearing different clothes, standing on a different platform, and you wonder, not for the first time and probably not for the last, how long you can keep both memories separate. How long before the version of you that belongs to 3025 starts to feel more real than the version that belongs to now. How long before memory chooses, just like the avatar warned. The rain intensifies. Or maybe it was always this heavy and you're only now noticing. Somewhere below, impossibly deep, you hear the sigh of brakes in the dark. A train pulling into a station that exists in the cracks between centuries. Your ticket is warm in your wallet, the clocks are stuttering, and you know that if you wanted to, if you needed to, you could find that hidden stairwell again. You could descend into green light and mechanical hum. You could speak your name at the exact right moment and ride the last subway through the long years ahead, through the slow death of cities and the patient work of maintaining the final loop. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. But memory is tricky, and names are more fragile than they seem. And every moment you spend listening to that impossible train is a moment you're learning to hear the future as clearly as the past. The last subway is still running. The loop is still turning. And somewhere between 2:25 and 2:26, between now and then, between who you were and who you're becoming, a door remains open. You close your eyes. The sway continues. The rain falls up and down and sideways all at once. And you know that when you finally fall asleep, you'll dream of brick arches wrapped in glowing conduits, of water caught mid-drip in blue stasis fields, of a train that treats time like just another kind of distance to be crossed. You'll dream of coming home, and you won't be entirely sure which platform you mean. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. The red time ball sits at mast peak, slick with drizzle that beads and runs down the copper roof below. Telegraph clicks filter through the window where you stand with a brass sextant raised, squinting through Thames haze at a sun reduced to a pale coin. The assistant calls 1 minute and you test your grip on the instrument, feeling the cold brass warm slightly under your palm. The placard by the yard gate reads, "Ball drops precisely at 1 p.m. Meantime," and you have memorized today's solar altitude from the nautical almanac, the number burned into your mind like a prayer. The rule came to you in fragments over weeks of research in maritime archives, pieced together from margin notes in a curator's ledger. Set the chronometer to the second at the drop. Hold the sun to the correct altitude using the sextant, and as the ball passes half-mast, breathe once and do not blink, because at that instant the mast becomes a hinge between noons, opening onto any year that shared this particular sky. You zero the chronometer against the yard regulator, its brass case cool and heavy in your left hand, while your right keeps the sextant trained on the horizon mirage where Thames water meets fog. The equation of time adjustment is already calculated, the index error of the sextant corrected to the arc-second. The yard quiets as the moment approaches, even the river traffic seems to hush, and then the ball twitches at the top of its mast. You align the sun's lower limb precisely on the artificial horizon, breathing slowly, and the ball begins its descent. At half-mast your breath catches involuntarily, and the air around you shears like silk being torn, a sensation of fabric ripping that you feel in your teeth. Sound thins to a whisper, the modern traffic noise bleeds away, and when you blink the yard is still there but older, subtly different in ways that accumulate as you look around. The same buildings frame the yard, but the uniforms are wrong, the trees are fewer and younger, the paint on the office doors is a different shade of institutional green. A captain in a navy coat checks his pocket watch and nods with satisfaction at the falling ball, speaking to a midshipman about the accuracy of the signal. Your phone vibrates in your pocket, and you pull it out fast, shielding it from view, and see that it now insists on displaying GMT with no option to change time zones, the menu simply gone from the settings as if it never existed. You pocket it quickly, pulse hammering, and the captain glances your way, but you've already turned to examine the chronometer, playing the role of an assistant checking instruments. The curator's ledger had mentioned calibration days scattered through the 19th century, when the ball was hoisted manually for testing, perfect anchor points for return attempts, and you had memorized a dozen dates. But the stakes crystallized only after that first crossing, when you returned to the present and found your kitchen lights dimming at exactly 1 o'clock every afternoon as if honoring some invisible drop, your laptop's clock stubbornly refusing to acknowledge daylight savings, and the bus schedule at the corner showing arrival times that had shifted by minutes toward GMT rounding. Each crossing pulls your present toward Greenwich time like iron filings drag toward a magnet, devices and infrastructure, and even your own circadian rhythm bending toward the prime meridian, and you begin to wonder how many jumps you can make before your entire life runs only on universal time, detached from the local rhythms of London's offset from the line. You test the range by repeating the procedure across different weather conditions, learning to read the sky like a manuscript. The sextant fixed at a particular altitude and the breath held at precisely half-mast will take you to any year when the sun matched that angle, through similar atmospheric conditions. The 1840s taste of coal smoke and navy wool, cannon fire thumping upriver from the tower, the telegraph not yet installed so the 1 o'clock signal goes out by semaphore, the 1920s crackle with wireless chatter, voices through static discussing shipping lanes and Greenwich pips transmitted by radio for the first time. There is a fog year you cannot quite pin down when the yard is all lamps and coughing, and the ball drops through such thick air it seems to fall in slow motion, and returning from that crossing you find your wristwatch in the present can no longer be set to any time except GMT, the crown simply spinning uselessly when you try to adjust it backward or forward. Weather becomes your first complication as autumn settles over the river and drizzle thickens to proper rain. The sun's edge blurs through water vapour, making it harder to hold the precise altitude needed for a clean crossing, and twice you mistime the breath and end up in the wrong decade. Once in the 1950s during a yard renovation when half the instruments are packed in crates. Once in the 1870s during a labour dispute when the ball drops 10 seconds late and you arrive disoriented into an argument about wages. Authority is the second problem when a custodian in a stiff uniform that makes him look like a beefeater begins questioning your repeated presence in the yard, asking to see credentials you do not have, and you bluff with talk of a calibration errand from the Royal Observatory, using technical language about index errors and chronometer rates, until his eyes glaze and he waves you through. The mechanics of the apparatus itself begin to fail, as the ball's hoist ratchet shows its age across your repeated visits to the same November afternoon, the PAL slipping on the drum so that one crossing misfires entirely and you slam back into the present without having moved, your head ringing and your vision doubled for an hour afterward. The personal costs accumulate like compound interest. After the second jump, your wristwatch will not leave GMT no matter how you adjust it. After the 4th, your kitchen lights dim at 1 o'clock daily as if the drop casts a shadow forward through time. After the 7th crossing, you wake hungry at 1300 hours sharp, every day regardless of when you last ate. Your body convinced that 1 o'clock is the axis around which the day rotates. Your friends begin to complain that their devices are acting strangely when you visit. Oven clocks shifting to British time, car dashboards displaying UTC instead of local hours, and you stop accepting invitations because you cannot explain what's happening without sounding unhinged. You decide to test whether altering a time signal might ripple forward and choose a specific noon from the archives. A notorious fog day in 1888 when multiple ships collided in the Thames because the time ball dropped late. The assistant having been drunk and the prism fogged, the signal going out nearly 2 minutes behind true Greenwich time. You align the sun precisely despite the thick air, the sextant heavy in your cramped fingers, and at half-mast you slip through into that chaotic noon with its smell of panic and wet rope. The assistant is indeed drunk, slumped against the wall, and the prism is badly fogged so the ball will drop late if no one intervenes. You help clean the prism with your sleeve and tighten the hoist mechanism, working quickly while the few people in the yard assume you belong there, and when the ball drops it is only half a second off instead of 2 minutes. You feel a deep satisfaction as you execute the return procedure at twilight, winding the chronometer forward and hauling the ball up by hand until your shoulders burn, then releasing it and stepping through the cable's clink back into the present. But the present has shifted. Public transit boards throughout the city now show arrival times nudged toward GMT minutes, rounding in ways they did not before. Your calendar app refuses to display time zones at all, showing only UTC with a locked icon when you try to change it. The kitchen lights that are dimmed now go fully dark at 1 o'clock, a blackout that lasts exactly 3 seconds like a daily eclipse. Your sleep schedule drifts further until you can only fall asleep with Greenwich pips playing from your phone, the 6 electronic tones that mark the hour on BBC Radio, and you wake at dawn thinking in nautical twilight calculations instead of alarm clock times. Escalation comes when you return to an 1890 crossing and find the telegraph line down, a pole toppled in a storm, and the yard in chaos because without the telegraph tick from the observatory, the 1 o'clock signal cannot be properly synchronised. The ball will not drop, ships will not get the time, navigators will be lost. You find yourself splicing the wire with a pocket multi-tool you carried through, your fingers numb with cold as you twist copper strands together and tape them with friction tape from the telegraph office. The tick resumes, the signal goes. Out, the ball drops clean, and as it passes half-mast you feel a tug in your ribs like a fish hook setting deep, as if noon itself has claimed you and will not let go. Returning to the present, you find that analogue clocks in your neighbourhood have begun to chime at 1 instead of their designated hours, church bells and school bells and the clock tower at City Hall all sounding together in the early afternoon, regardless of what time zone they are supposed to observe. The return procedure becomes a ritual you perfect through repetition. Wait for nautical twilight when the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon, wind the chronometer forward to match your present's full offset from the crossing point, hoist the ball by hand to mast peak using the manual wheel, your muscles screaming with effort, then release the catch and let it fall clean while you stand at the base of the mast. With the final cable clink you step through, the air shearing again but in reverse, and you arrive at your own twilight with the yard snapping into contemporary configuration around you. But each return costs more. After the 10th crossing, all clocks around, you display UTC with no local option visible, the setting simply gone. After the 15th, your circadian rhythm is fully locked to Greenwich, your body temperature peaking at noon, prime meridian time, your hunger arriving with the 1 o'clock bells that now sound from sources that should not be able to chime. You plan one final crossing to decouple, to break the pull before it becomes permanent. You choose a pristine clear sky noon from the deepest tables of the nautical almanac, a day that still matches today's solar altitude with mathematical perfection, no fog or clouds to complicate the alignment. You spend a week preparing, polishing the hoist drum in the present until it gleams, oiling the pawl with watchmaker's lubricant, truing the chronometer against radio pips you can faintly hear across time when you stand in just the right spot in the yard. On the chosen day you arrive early, the drizzle gone for once, the sun sharp-edged and clear. You raise the sextant and the brass is warm in your hand from being carried close to your body. The ball twitches at mast peak, red against pale sky, and begins its fall. At half-mast you breathe once, do not blink, and the hinge opens like a blade folding, and you are through into that perfect noon, the air crystalline, the yard silent except for the tick of the telegraph and the lap of water against stone. You do nothing there, change nothing, simply stand and breathe and let the moment exist in its precision. At twilight you execute the return by the book, every step measured, winding the chronometer with steady clicks, hauling the ball up hand over hand until the rope burns through your gloves, releasing it with a clean snap. The yard transforms and you are back in the present, stumbling slightly as contemporary traffic noise crashes over you like a wave. Some things relent. Your phone shows time zone options again. The menu restored as if it had never vanished. The train boards regain local minutes, no longer rounding everything to GMT. Your wristwatch will accept adjustment, the crown turning smoothly to set whatever time you choose, but not everything returns. The City Hall tower clock has quietly adopted a Greenwich strike, its bells marking hours in UTC that no one else seems to notice or question. Your stomach still schedules itself by 1 o'clock bells, hunger arriving punctually in the early afternoon regardless of your meal times. The kitchen lights still dim for 3 seconds at the drop moment, a daily eclipse you have learned to anticipate. You mark your windowsill with a thin brass line aligned to the prime meridian using a compass and calculation, a private meridian inscribed where only you will see it. At local noon you catch yourself glancing toward 1 o'clock, your internal clock still half synchronized to Greenwich, your body living in 2 time zones at once. The sextant stays wrapped in flannel in a drawer, the chronometer wound but stored in its velvet cradle, and on fog days when the light goes soft and diffuse you feel the hinge breathe, a looseness in the air at the yard that calls to you. You can cross again, you know the procedure by heart now, precision and breath, and the discipline of not blinking, but every perfect drop binds you tighter to the line that once ruled the world, the arbitrary mark that became absolute, the convention that bent ships and schedules and lives to its measure. You stand at your window with tea going cold in your hand and watch the afternoon light, living on the prime meridian whether you cross again or not, time itself rewired around you like telegraph lines, humming with a signal only you can fully hear. The weeks after your final crossing settle into a rhythm that feels both familiar and alien, days measured by the gap between what your body knows and what the world expects. You take a job cataloguing maritime instruments at a museum near the Docklands, partly because the work appeals to you and partly because the commute forces you past the yard twice daily, a pilgrimage you cannot quite abandon. The other cataloguers notice your precision with chronometers, the way you can diagnose a regulation problem by the sound of the escapement alone, how you instinctively convert between mean time and apparent solar time without needing tables. They assume you're simply devoted to the work, obsessive in the way specialists can be, and you let them believe it because the truth would require explanations you cannot give. Your flat becomes a study in temporal schizophrenia. The microwave clock blinks UTC in steady green digits, while the stove beside it insists on local time, and you have stopped trying to synchronize them because they will only drift apart again within hours. The living room clock, an antique schoolhouse piece you bought at a market, chimes at 1 o'clock. Regardless of where its hands point, the mechanism corrupted by proximity to you in ways you do not fully understand. You have learned to read time in layers, checking multiple devices to triangulate the actual hour, your perception fractured between the present moment and the ghost of Greenwich that follows you like a shadow longitude. Sleep comes in strange tides now. You fall asleep easily at night but wake at dawn with the specific quality of light that corresponds to nautical twilight at the prime meridian, your body convinced that this is the hour for return procedures even when you have no intention of crossing. Some mornings you rise and go through the motions anyway, winding the pocket watch you keep by the bed, calculating offsets in your head, your hands moving through the choreography of a ritual you have not performed in weeks. It soothes something in you, this phantom rehearsal, as if your nervous system needs to remember the pattern to feel whole. The museum holds a reception for a new exhibit on Victorian navigation, and you attend because your supervisor insists, nursing warm wine and drifting between display cases filled with instruments you recognise not from catalogue descriptions, but from having seen them in use, the brass still bright with recent polishing in the noons you visited. A professor from the Royal Observatory gives a talk about the history of time signals, and you stand at the back half listening, until she mentions an anomaly in the 1888 records where a particularly bad fog day shows a time ball drop that should have been catastrophically late, but was recorded as only marginally off. She calls it a clerical error, a mistake in the log, and you grip your wine glass hard enough that the stem creaks. You corrected that drop, spliced that timeline, and the ripple is visible in archival records a century and a half later. The professor moves on to other topics, but you remain fixed on that single data point. Proof that your interventions have weight, that changing a signal in the past does not simply evaporate but persists, embedded in the world like a scar in wood. After the reception, you walk to the yard even though it is late and the gates are locked. You stand outside the fence, hands in your pockets, watching the mast silhouetted against sodium lights and low clouds. The red ball is lowered for the night, resting in its cradle, dormant. A security guard walks past on his rounds and asks if you're lost, and you say you're waiting for someone, the easiest lie, and he nods and continues on. You're waiting, you realise, but not for a person. You're waiting for the feeling of the hinge to assert itself, for the air to shear, for some sign that the crossing is still possible even though you have vowed to stop. Nothing happens. The yard remains stubbornly contemporary, locked in the present, and eventually you turn away and catch the last train home, the carriage empty except for you and a drunk sleeping across 3 seats. The months stretch and compress in uneven measures. Spring comes early, daffodils in the park blooming weeks ahead of schedule, and you wonder if this too is an effect of your crossings, seasons slipping their moorings the way clocks have. But you have no way to prove causation, and the thought exhausts you. Your supervisor at the museum assigns you to restore a marine chronometer from the 1850s, its mechanism seized with old oil and corrosion, and you disassemble it with jeweler's tools over the course of weeks, each component cleaned and examined and sketched in a notebook you keep for the purpose. The balance wheel is cracked, and you fabricate a replacement, teaching yourself the mathematics of isochronous oscillation, the way period must remain constant regardless of amplitude. It is meditative work, hours passing in silence, except for the tick of your own breathing and the soft click of tools on brass, and when you finally reassemble the chronometer and set it running, its beat is so steady you can feel it in your chest like a second heartbeat synchronizing with your own. You test it against the radio pips one afternoon, the BBC's 6 tones marking the hour, and the chronometer is within a quarter second of true Greenwich time despite having been silent for a century and a half. Your supervisor is impressed, talks about your natural aptitude for precision work, suggests you consider training in conservation at a higher level. You nod and thank her, but you know the aptitude is not natural. It is learned through necessity, through hours spent in the yard with a sextant and a countdown, your body calibrated to the exact rhythm of mean solar time the way a compass is calibrated to magnetic north. The chronometer sits on your workbench ticking, and you leave it running after everyone else goes home, the sound filling the empty room like a whispered conversation between past and present. A letter arrives one morning, forwarded from an old address, postmarked from Greenwich itself. Inside is a single page of heavy stationery with the Royal Observatory letterhead, a note from an archivist you have never met. She has found your name in margin notes of the curator's ledger, the same ledger where you discovered the crossing rule. Your handwriting somehow presented entries from the 1890s describing adjustments to the time ball mechanism. She asks if you are a descendant of the original writer, interested in family history, and would you like to visit the archives to see the documents in person. You read the letter 3 times, hands shaking, because you never wrote in the ledger during your crossings. You were always careful to remain unobtrusive, invisible, a ghost in the mechanism. But the handwriting is unmistakably yours, the phrasing you would use, descriptions of problems you solved. The timeline has folded, your future actions recorded as past events, and the loop is tighter than you realized. You do not respond to the letter. Instead you take it to the yard one afternoon when rain keeps the tourists away and the gate is unattended. You stand at the base of the mast where the hinge always felt strongest, and you burn the letter with a lighter, holding it until the flame nearly reaches your fingers before dropping it to the wet pavement where it curls and blackens and disintegrates. The archivist's question dies with the paper, but the ledger entries remain, written in your hand decades before you were born, a closed loop of causation you cannot untangle. You feel the hook in your ribs again, that tug of noon claiming you, and you realise you're not just living on the prime meridian anymore, you are becoming part of its mechanism, a component in the system that measures and transmits time. That night you dream of the yard in a year you've never visited, sometime in the late 19th century during winter, snow on the roofs and ice in the river. You're hauling the ball up for a return procedure, but the rope is frozen stiff and the drum will not turn smoothly. The sun is already below the horizon, twilight fading fast, and if you do not release the ball in the next 30 seconds, you will be trapped in that noon forever, unable to return. Your hands slip on the icy rope, the ball rises by painful inches, and just as the last light drains from the sky, you reach the top and release the catch. The ball falls, the cable clinks, and you wake in your own bed, gasping as if you have been holding your breath underwater. The clock on your nightstand reads 1 in the afternoon, though outside the window it is clearly 3 in the morning, and you realise you have lost time. Hours gone missing the way they do when the hinge breathes too close. You start keeping a journal, not of your days, but of discrepancies, moments when time behaves strangely in your proximity. The coffee shop where you stop most mornings serves you a drink that is somehow still hot from an order you placed the previous day, the barista confused about whether you already paid. A meeting at the museum that you remember attending is rescheduled, and your supervisor insists it never happened yet, though you have notes from the discussion in your notebook. The train you take home arrives at the station before it departs from the previous stop according to the digital boards, and other passengers notice, filming it on their phones, a minor glitch that makes local news before being dismissed as a software error. You are leaking, you realise, your temporal distortion no longer contained to clocks and schedules but affecting events, causation itself becoming unreliable in your vicinity. The curator's ledger haunts you, and you return to the museum's archives late one night, using your staff key, pulling the fragile volume from its climate-controlled case. The margin notes are there in your handwriting, describing repairs and adjustments you will make, have made, are making in some conjugation of tense that English cannot properly express. One entry describes a crossing to January 1895 to replace a worn cable before it snaps, during a critical drop, preventing a disaster that will otherwise kill the assistant on duty. The entry is dated 6 months from now in your personal timeline, but the event it describes is already past in history, already happened, and you understand with cold certainty that you're going to make that crossing, have no choice but to make it, because the timeline has already recorded your presence there. You're trapped not by the mechanism but by your own future actions, a loop of obligations stretching forward and backward from the moment you first learned the rule. You close the ledger carefully, reshelve it in its case, and lock the archive room behind you. Walking home through empty streets, you try to imagine a life where you never found the margin notes, never learned the procedure, never raised the sextant at that first half-mast drop. But the counterfactual will not hold because the ledger entries prove you were always going to cross, always going to bind yourself to Greenwich. The timeline requiring your participation, the way a lock requires a key. Free will becomes a question without meaning when past and future are a single surface folded over itself. Your choice is already made from a perspective you have not yet reached. The winter solstice arrives, and with it the longest night. Darkness stretching from afternoon through morning in a grip that feels appropriate to your situation. You take the sextant from its drawer for the first time in months, unwrap it from the flannel, and the brass is cold enough to burn your palm. At noon you stand at your window with the instrument raised, sighting the low winter sun through glass streaked with condensation, and you hold the altitude steady just to remember the sensation, the weight of precision in your hands. The sun crosses the meridian, local noon sliding past 1 o'clock Greenwich as it always does, and for a moment the light in your flat shifts, brightens, the hinge breathing audible as a high ringing in your ears. You do not blink, barely breathe, the moment extending like molten glass, and then it passes and the light returns to normal, and you lower the sextant with hands that shake from more than cold. You can still cross. The hinge remains open to you, the mechanism accepting your calibration, and the knowledge sits in your chest like ballast. In 6 months you will return to the yard, will make the January 1895 crossing to prevent the cable disaster, because the ledger says you did and history requires your presence. But until then you have time, days that are your own even if their ultimate direction is already plotted. You wrap the sextant again, place it back in the drawer and make tea that you drink while watching the winter light fade, living on the prime meridian but not consumed by it, bound but not broken, your life a collaboration between choice and necessity that you are learning to navigate one careful noon at a time. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. You jolt onto the rooftop and your knees buckle on wet tar. Rain needles your face. The sky is a bruised canvas stretched tight over London, and hanging in it like bloated sentinels are the barrage balloons, silvered gas bags tethered by cables swaying in the wind. Below you the Thames is a dull strip of pewter threading through the blackout, and somewhere down there people are shouting, metal clattering against metal, generators coughing into life. Your hands are shaking. You don't know how you got here, but the air smells wrong. Coal smoke and wet brick and something acrid that might be cordite. You're on a flat roof, maybe 4 stories up, surrounded by chimney stacks and the skeletal frames of radio aerials. To your left, a searchlight crew is wrestling a massive lamp into position, the barrel of it swinging through the drizzle. To your right, another crew does the same, their breath pluming white in the cold. A warden in a tin helmet swings a blackout hood over a skylight and barks at you. "Lights out, you daft sod!" You stumble back and nearly trip over a coil of cable. The warden doesn't wait for an answer, just moves on, his boots squelching in the puddles. Anti-aircraft guns thud in the distance, a bass rhythm that you feel in your sternum. The searchlight to your left suddenly ignites, a cone of white stabbing upward into the cloud deck. Then the one to your right joins it, and where the 2 beams cross the clouds seem to ripple, to glow with something that isn't quite light. For half a heartbeat you see it. Your city, your London, glass towers catching neon, construction cranes skeletal against a different sky, and then it snaps away, and there's only 1940 again, only the war. You press your palms against your temples. This isn't real. This can't be real. But the rain is cold, and the tar is gritty under your shoes, and when you breathe you taste ash. A door bangs open behind you, and a young man in coveralls stumbles out of a crew hut, arms full of charts. He's maybe 20, with oil smudges on his cheek and eyes that haven't slept in days. He sees you and frowns. You the runner from Sector? You open your mouth, close it, nod. "About bloody time," he mutters, and thrusts a rolled paper at you. "Eddie," he says, by way of introduction. "You seen the 4-lamp trick?" You unroll the paper. It's a star chart, hand-drawn in pencil and chalk, the Big Dipper sketched with careful angles and bearings noted in the margins. Someone's written elevation 40 degrees azimuth, 310 degrees, next to 1 star, and hold pattern 10 sec minimum at the bottom. "What is this?" you ask, and your voice sounds strange to your own ears. Too modern, too flat. Eddie glances over his shoulder at the searchlights. "Old wives' tale, innit? Some of the lads reckon if you get 4 beams to line up just so, like stars, yeah? It calms the clouds, keeps the fog from rolling in too thick. Load of bollocks, probably. But we tried it last week and the sky cleared for 20 minutes. Long enough to spot 2 Heinkels before they could drop their loads." You stare at the chart. The Big Dipper. Your constellation. The one you can see from your flat on clear nights. The one you used to trace with your finger as a kid. 4 stars. Dubhe, Merak, Fector, Megrez. 4 searchlights. The rule clicks into place in your mind like a key turning. You don't know how you know, but you do. Coordinate 4 searchlights to place their beam tips at the stars of your constellation. Hold the pattern 10 seconds. The crossed cones will carve a door of light. "I need to talk to your sergeant," you say. Eddie blinks. "He's on the next roof over." "Why?" "Now." The sergeant is a brick of a man with a moustache like a steel brush and eyes that have seen too much. He's barking orders into a field phone when you climb across the plank bridge connecting the roofs, the wood flexing under your weight, wind trying to claw you off into the street 4 stories below. You grab the railing, just a rope strung between posts, and haul yourself onto his roof. "Who the hell are you?" he demands, phone still clamped to his ear. You straighten, force your voice crisp and authoritative. "Orders from Sector. We're coordinating a pattern, roofs A, B, C and this one. 4 beams, specific bearings. It's for spotting." The sergeant's eyes narrow. "I didn't get any." "You're getting them now," you snap, and something in your tone, or maybe the rain plastering your hair to your skull making you look half drowned and desperate, makes him hesitate. "What bearings?" he asks finally. You pull out the star chart, your hands steadier now. "I'll position each crew. We need field phones linking all 4 roofs." He studies you for a long moment, then nods curtly. "You've got 15 minutes. Then we're back to standard sweep patterns. Jerry could be overhead any second." You take the field phone and start calling the other roofs. One crew is already in position. That's Eddie's team. 2 more are nearby, their lamps angled wrong but close enough. You translate the dipper's coordinates into azimuths and elevations, numbers the crews can actually use. Dubhe, azimuth 315, elevation 42 degrees. Merak, azimuth 320, elevation 38 degrees. Vector, azimuth 310 degrees, elevation 35 degrees. Megrez, azimuth 305, elevation 40 degrees. Your hands are cramping from gripping the phone too hard. The rain is heavier now, drumming on the tar, and the generators are howling as the crews power up their lamps. You scramble between roofs, using the plank bridges and one terrifying ladder climb, chalking big numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on the parapets so each crew can see their role at a glance. On my mark, you shout into the phone, your voice tinny through the speaker. Beam 1, up. The first searchlight ignites, a pillar of white stabbing upward. You've positioned it to be Duba, the pointer star. Beam 2, up. Merak joins it, and where the 2 cones intersect, the cloud glows with that impossible shimmer again. You catch a flash of your city, a bus, red and modern, sliding across the ghost image before it fades. Beam 3, up, Vector. But the wind gusts and the beam wobbles, the tip sliding 3 degrees off target. You can see the operator fighting the handwheel, the lamp's massive barrel swinging like a siege weapon. Hold it, you shout. Clamp down. Beam 4, up. Megrez rises, but it's too far left, the angle wrong. The 4 beams form a rough quadrilateral instead of the dipper's clean lines. Where they cross, the glow flickers. Your river, the Thames but not the Thames, a lit tower that won't be built for 80 years. And then flak bursts shred the sky to the east and the pattern collapses. The sergeant's voice crackles over the phone. What the hell was that? We're trying again, you say. No, you're not. We've got a Heinkel inbound bearing... 2 minutes, you cut him off. Give me 2 minutes. You hang up before he can argue. Eddie appears at your elbow, rain streaming off his helmet. Generator 3 just cut out, he says. We're on backup, but it's flickering. Of course it is. You follow him down a narrow gap between chimney stacks to where a diesel generator is coughing black smoke. The cable running from it to the nearest searchlight is half submerged in a puddle. You and Eddie grab the cable. It's heavy, rubber-coated, slick with rain, and haul it onto a wooden pallet, rerouting it away from the water. Your palms burn. Eddie's knuckles are raw and bleeding. Should hold now, he pants. The warden appears again, his face red. You're silhouetting the whole bloody block. Angle those beams up or I'm shutting you down. They're already up, you say, but you check the elevations anyway, calling adjustments to each crew. 4 degrees lower to catch the fog deck that's rolling in from the east. No ground glare, no direct sight lines to the street. The warden grumbles but doesn't follow through on his threat. You chalk the revised numbers on a scrap of plywood and prop it where all 4 roofs can see it. Star 1, elevation 3080. Star 2, elevation 3040. Star 3, elevation 31. Star 4, elevation 3060. The constellation will sit lower in the sky now, cradled in the fog. You grab the field phone again. Your hands won't stop shaking. Listen up, you say, and your voice is steadier than you feel. On my mark, beams up to position, then tiny trims only. Nothing big, just nudges. When I start counting, you hold. Don't move a muscle. I'll count 1 to 10. If we break before 10, we start over. Silence on the line. Then Eddie's voice. Right. We're ready. You close your eyes and sync your breathing with the generator's chuff, chuff, chuff. The rhythm steadies you. You open your eyes. Mark. Beam 1 rises. Beam 2 rises. They're climbing slower this time. The operator's easing the wheels instead of cranking them. Where the cones intersect, the glow starts immediately. A pale wash like moonlight through gauze. Beam 3 rises, but overshoots. Back 2 degrees, you bark into the phone. The beam drops jerky, then smooths out. Beam 4 rises, slides left. Ease right 1 degree there. The pattern forms. The Big Dipper traced in light across a wartime sky, each beam tip touching a star only you can see. The glow where they meet is thickening, turning from gauze to milk to something denser. 1, you say into the phone. Your voice is a metronome. The glow brightens. In it you see the Thames bend, exactly where it should be, but lined with modern buildings, glass and steel, lights winking. 2, the ghost river aligns with the real river below. A high rise from your time flares in the glow like a memory trying to surface. 3, a gust hits. Beam 3 jitters. You hear the operator cursing, the wheel squeaking. "Clamp it," you shout. "Tiny trims only." 4. The glow is a plane now, vertical, like a sheet of light stood on its edge. You can see through it. Your city, your London, rain slicking the pavement, a taxi idling at a corner. 5. Flak bursts to the north. The sergeant is yelling something you can't make out. A bomber's shadow drifts across the moon, low and heavy. "Beams to target," the sergeant orders. "Rake the sky." "Stay on pattern," you shout back. Your voice cracks. "Stay on it." Eddie's voice, thin with fear. "There's a Heinkel right above us." 6, you say. You don't look up. The glow thickens further. It's not just light anymore. It has weight, substance. The edges are sharp, rectangular, a doorway cut into the air. 7, a whistle, falling debris. Something metallic crashes onto the next roof over and you hear men shouting. Your hat lifts in the wind, grit stinging your cheek. Eddie is staring at you, waiting for the order to break pattern, to run. You nod at him. Keep counting. 8. The plane of light is solid now. Through it you see your street, your block, the corner shop with its LED sign, and the bus stop with its digital display. The rooftop sounds are fading. Generators, wind, shouts. Replaced by a high, glassy ring like a tuning fork struck in a cathedral. 9. The beams cross hard, locking the pattern. The doorway's open, a bright rectangle suspended in rain, and it's not just an image anymore, it's a threshold. You can feel the pull of it, the modern air beyond smelling like hot concrete and exhaust instead of coal smoke. 10. You step forward. The rooftop tilts, and the rain turns to the hiss of tyres on wet asphalt. You're standing on a sidewalk, your sidewalk, the one outside your flat. The air is warm. Street lamps glow amber along the river. Your pocket buzzes and you pull out your phone. The screen is locked on night mode, amber and dim, and the time reads 11:47 p.m, but the date is today. You're present. You turn. Behind you the doorway is still there, a seam of light hanging in the air above a bus shelter. Through it, you see the rooftop, Eddie staring at the space where you were, his mouth open. The light flickers, fades. The doorway shrinks to a silver line and vanishes. You stand there in the rain, heart hammering, and reach for the light switch on the nearest lamppost. It doesn't respond. The lamp is already dimmed, locked into some low lumen setting you don't remember. You check your phone again, the brightness is locked, the night mode setting greyed out, unchangeable. A siren rises in the distance. Not modern, not quite. It sounds like an all clear, that long rising note from the Blitz, but it's faint, an echo in the wrong decade. You know somehow, the way you knew the rule before, to go back, you need to wait for the all clear and uncross the beams in reverse order of the constellation, while the siren matches your count. The door works both ways, but only on its own terms. The siren crests. You close your eyes, and the light blooms behind you, spilling across the pavement. You step backward through it, into cold and smoke and the thud of distant guns. You're on the rooftop again. Eddie yelps and nearly drops the field phone. How did you... Uncross them, you gasp. Reverse order, beam 4 down, then 3, then 2, then 1. The beams drop one by one and the doorway thins to a seam and winks out. Dawn is a faint blue line in the east. The all-clear siren is dying away. The real one, the 1941. You test the pattern again 2 nights later. A shorter lock, 7 seconds instead of 10 to save the men's eyes from the glare. You step through, return to your present, and notice the changes immediately. The street lamps on your block click off at 10 p.m. now, not midnight. The cinema 2 streets over has a dead bulb in its neon sign. The O in Apollo refuses to light no matter how many times they replace it. Your flat's hallway is darker, the motion sensor lights defaulting to a low amber glow that barely reaches the corners. Your laptop screen won't go above 70% brightness. Each successful lock blackouts part of modern life. Your city is quietly adopting wartime habits, dimming itself one light at a time. You go back a 3rd time because there's a raid coming, a big one, and the sergeant tells you the pattern, your pattern, reduces stray glare, seems to calm the clouds, buys seconds for the spotters to track the bombers before they can reach the river docks. Those seconds matter. Those seconds mean crews don't burn, children don't die in their beds, ambulances make it through the rubble-choked streets. But each lock you achieve dims your own era a little more. You come back to find every traffic light on your commute stuck in low-power mode, the crosswalk signals dim enough that you have to squint to see them. The grocery store's fluorescents are half-strength. Your office building's corridors are cave-dark after 7 p.m. How many locks can you live with? How much light are you willing to trade? You stand on the 1940 rooftop with rain hammering the tar and Eddie looking at you with something like hope in his eyes. The field phone crackles. Raid confirmed. 30 Heinkels inbound. ETA 4 minutes. One more lock, you tell him. One more and I'm done. He nods. For the lads on the river? For the lads on the river. You call the pattern. The beams rise. The count begins. You hold it for the full 10 seconds, watching the door of light open and the ghost city shimmer beyond it. The bombers drone overhead, but the pattern holds, the reduced glare giving the gun crews precious seconds to track and fire. You hear the guns roar, see tracer rounds stitching the sky, and one of the Heinkels banks hard and peels away trailing smoke. 10, you say, and step through. Your present is darker. The river walk where you used to jog at night is unlit past 9 p.m. now. The bridge lamps follow a new schedule. Tighter angles, fewer pools of light, earlier cut-offs. Neon signs all over the city have dead letters. Restaurant signs missing vowels. Theatre marquees with gaps like missing teeth. Your phone is a permanent amber glow that strains your eyes, but you can't change it, can't override it. But the news alert that pings, soft, amber, barely visible, says a river emergency drill yesterday ran faster than ever before. Emergency crews navigated the dark corridors of a flooded building in record time, their eyes already adapted, their protocols mysteriously improved for low-light conditions. No casualties, perfect execution. You stand by your window as rain threads the glass. The city outside is dimmer than it was a week ago, but somehow it feels safer, more deliberate, like it's learned something from the blackout years. Somewhere in the distance a siren sounds and its overtones are older, layered with echoes from 80 years back. You cup your hands and look up. The clouds are low and heavy, and you know that if you wanted to, if you found 4 searchlights, or even 4 strong flashlights, and traced the constellation just right, you could open the door again. You could go back and help Eddie and his crew through another raid, trade another slice of brightness for another night of lives saved. But you don't. You let the clouds pass, let the sky stay yours, let the city keep what light it has left. The rain taps the window like Morse code. You think of Eddie, of the sergeant with his steel brush moustache, of the men cranking the hand wheels on those massive lamps with their palms raw and bleeding. You think of the Thames below them, dull pewter in the blackout, and the Thames below you now, dimmer than it was but still flowing, still here. You turn away from the window, your flat is dark, the hallway darker, the street darkest of all. But when you close your eyes you can still see the 4 beams crossing, the constellation traced in light, the door opening like a promise or a warning. The sky waits, the clouds drift. And somewhere between then and now, in the space where searchlights cross and time folds like paper, the city learns to live with less, light and more shadow, trading brightness for safety one careful lock at a time. You sleep that night with the sound of rain on tar echoing in your dreams, and when you wake the world is a little darker but somehow more your own. But 3 days later the phone calls start. The first one comes at dawn, your phone vibrating on the nightstand, the screen's amber glow barely visible in the pre-dawn murk. You fumble for it, eyes gritty with sleep, unknown number. Hello? Is this the person who's been operating the searchlight pattern? The voice is clipped, professional, British, but modern. The 4-beam configuration. You sit up too fast. Your head spins. Who is this? My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm with the Royal Observatory. We've been tracking anomalous light signatures over London for the past week. Specifically, 4-point intersections that create localized temporal distortions in the cloud layer. The pattern matches historical records from 1940, but the effects are appearing now, in our present. I need to know if you're responsible. Your mouth is dry. You don't answer. I'm not with the government, she continues, softer now. I'm a researcher. I study atmospheric phenomena and chronometric anomalies. What you're doing, whatever you're doing, it's leaving traces, measurable ones, and I think I can help you understand what's happening to the city. You meet her at a cafe near the observatory that afternoon. She's younger than you expected, maybe 35, with black hair pulled back severely and glasses that keep sliding down her nose. She has a laptop and 3 notebooks spread across the table before you even sit down. "Show me your hands," she says without preamble. You extend them. Your palms are still raw in places, calloused in others. Marks from hauling cables, from gripping the field phone too hard, from steadying yourself on rain-slick parapets. She nods, satisfied. You've been there physically, not just observing, participating. That explains the severity of the blackout effect. The what? She turns her laptop toward you. On the screen is a map of London overlaid with heat signatures, zones of colour ranging from pale yellow to deep purple. Your neighbourhood is dark purple, almost black. Energy redistribution, she says. Every time you open a stable temporal doorway and pass through it, you're not just moving between time periods, you're creating a conservation exchange. Light energy from our present is being pulled backward to sustain the pattern in 1940. The more crossings you make, the more present-day illumination gets locked into a lower state. You stare at the map. The dark zones spread like ink stains from the points where you know you've opened the door. Your block, the Riverwalk, the streets you pass through returning from the rooftop. How much have I taken, you ask quietly. 7.3% of the city's total light output is now operating at reduced capacity. Street lamps, building, lights, personal devices, all dimmed or locked into low power modes. It's not just aesthetic. Traffic accidents are up 11% in the affected zones. 2 people have been mugged in areas that used to be well lit. A cyclist hit a curb she couldn't see and broke her collarbone. Your stomach clenches. You think of the emergency drill, the lives saved, and now this. The hidden cost coming due in your own time. Can it be reversed, you ask? Dr. Chen closes the laptop. I don't know. Theoretically, if you stopped making crossings, the energy drain should stabilise. But I don't think it would reverse on its own. The light that's been pulled back to 1940, it's being used there. Consumed. You can't get it back any more than you can unburn a candle. So what do I do? She meets your eyes. That depends. Why are you doing this? What's worth 7% of a city's light? You tell her. About Eddie and the crews, about the raid you helped them spot, about the seconds that saved lives on the river docks, about standing on a rooftop in 1940 with rain hammering down and knowing that your presence, your pattern, made a difference. She listens without interrupting. When you finish, she's quiet for a long moment. There's something else, she says finally. The temporal mechanics of what you're doing. They're not stable. Each crossing weakens the barrier between the time periods. Right now you need 4 searchlights and a precise pattern to open the door. But if you keep going, if you make enough crossings, the barrier will thin to the point where the door might open spontaneously. Anywhere. Any time. You could be walking down the street and suddenly step through into 1940 without meaning to. Or worse. Worse. Other people might fall through. The door might stay open. 2 time periods trying to occupy the same space, the same air, the same rain. She shakes her head. I don't know what would happen. Nobody does. But I don't think it would be good. You walk home through streets that are noticeably dimmer than they were a month ago. The sun is setting and the lamps are coming on, or trying to, some flicker and fail. Others glow with that sickly amber that's become the new normal in your neighbourhood. You pass a corner where 2 teenagers are squinting at their phones, the screens barely visible in the gloom, complaining about the brightness settings being locked. Your flat feels like a cave. You try turning on every light, but the cumulative effect is barely enough to read by. You stand at your window and look out at the city. Somewhere out there, 85 years in the past, Eddie and his crew are manning their searchlight, ready to trace patterns in the sky at a moment's notice. Somewhere out there, the blitz is still happening, bombs still falling, people still dying, and somewhere in between, a door waits to be opened. You don't go back for 2 weeks. You ignore the pull, the knowledge of how to trace the constellation, the memory of Eddie's hopeful eyes. You go to work, come home, live your life in a city that's slowly learning to function with less light. The news reports it as an energy-saving initiative, a grid optimization program, a response to climate concerns. Nobody knows the real reason except you and Dr. Chen. But then Eddie finds you. You're standing at the bus stop near your flat, waiting in the amber gloom, when you hear it. The crackle of a field phone, tinny and impossible. You turn and he's there, translucent, flickering like a projection, standing in the rain that isn't falling in your present but is falling in his. Need you back, he says. His voice sounds like it's coming through water. Big raid tonight. Biggest yet. The pattern. It works. It saves lives. The sergeant's asking for you. I can't, you say. A woman at the bus stop glances at you, then looks away quickly, pretending she didn't hear you talking to empty air. Every time I cross, it makes things worse here. Worse how? Eddie's image flickers. Darker? We live in the dark every night. We black out every window, every street. We live like moles, and we die like rats in the rubble when we get it wrong. Your dark has street lamps. Ours has bombs. People are getting hurt here because of the blackout I caused. People are dying here because you're not helping. The field phone crackles and cuts out. Eddie's gone. The bus pulls up, doors hissing open, and you stand there frozen as it drives away without you. That night you dream of searchlights. You dream of standing on the rooftop while the beams cross and recross, tracing patterns that aren't quite the Dipper, doors opening and closing like mouths trying to speak. You dream of falling through one and landing not in 1940 but somewhere else entirely, 1914, trenches and gas and mud, or 1666, the city burning, flames instead of searchlights reaching for the sky. You wake gasping, your sheets soaked with sweat despite the cold. Dr. Chen calls the next morning. The barrier's thinning faster than I predicted, she says without preamble. I'm picking up microfissures all over the affected zones, small temporal leaks. Nothing a person could pass through yet, but did you go back? Did you open the door again? No. Then someone else is trying to, or something from 1940 is pushing through from the other side. You meet her at the observatory. She shows you the data, spikes in chronometric readings, localized drops in air pressure, reports from your neighborhood of people hearing air raid sirens that aren't real, seeing flashes in the sky that don't correspond to any aircraft or lightning. It's Eddie, you say. One of the men from the searchlight crew. He came through, not physically, but like a projection. He asked me to come back. Dr. Chen goes very still. If they're reaching through from their side, if they're trying to reopen the door without you, it'll tear, you finish. The barrier. It'll tear and we'll both fall through, won't we? 1940 and now, all mixed together. She nods slowly. I think so, and I don't think either time period would survive it intact. You have a choice to make, and you hate both options. Go back and risk destabilizing the barrier further, dimming the city more, maybe even causing the catastrophic collapse Dr. Chen is predicting. Or refuse and let Eddie and his crew struggle through the raid without the pattern, without the small advantage your constellation gives them, and possibly let the barrier tear anyway as they desperately try to pull you back. You make your decision standing at your window as dusk falls, and the inadequate lamps flicker on across the city. You think about the emergency crews who navigated the dark building so efficiently, about the skills your city is relearning from its own past. You think about Eddie holding that field phone with raw, bleeding hands, counting on you. You call Dr. Chen. If I go back one more time, you say, can you monitor it? Track the energy exchange, the barrier stress, all of it? Yes. Why? Because I'm going to close the door. Permanently. Seal it so it can't be opened again. Not by me, not by Eddie, not by anyone. I don't know if that's possible. Neither do I, but I have to try. She's silent for a long moment. Then, I'll meet you there. Where do you need to be? You tell her the rooftop. Your rooftop. The one in your present that corresponds to Eddie's position in 1940. She arrives with equipment, sensors, meters, devices you don't recognize. You stand together in the amber gloom as rain begins to fall, and you look up at the clouds. How do you open it from this side? She asks. You pull out your phone. You've already called in favours, made arrangements. 4 friends positioned on 4 nearby roofs, each with a high-powered spotlight borrowed or rented or stolen. You've given them the coordinates, the angles, the timing. The same way, you say. 4 lights, the constellation, 10 seconds. And then? Then I go through and I uncross them in a pattern that will collapse the door inward instead of just closing it. Axing eel, not a pause. At least that's the theory. Dr. Chen checks her equipment. I'll monitor from here. If the barrier starts to catastrophically fail, you'll know before I do, you finish. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. You lift your phone and send the message. Now. 4 beams rise into the rain-heavy sky, LED spotlights tracing the stars of the Dipper. They're not as powerful as the 1940 searchlights, but they're enough. Where they cross, the glow begins, that familiar milk-white shimmer that means the door is forming. You count. 1, 2, 3, The glow thickens. 4, 5, 6. It becomes a plane, a threshold. 7, 8, 9. Through it you see Eddie's rooftop, see him standing there waiting, his face breaking into a grin of relief. 10, you say, and you step through one final time into the rain and smoke and distant thunder of guns, ready to close the door behind you forever. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Cold bites through wool. Frost silvers the grass beneath your feet, each blade rigid and glittering under starlight so thick it feels like you could reach up and draw your fingers through it like water. The trilithons loom like dark teeth against the sky, massive sarsen blocks standing in pairs with lintels balanced impossibly across their tops. And though you've studied the photographs, read the theories, memorized the dimensions, nothing prepared you for the weight of them, the way they seem to lean inward as if listening. A steady wind threads between the stones, low and insistent, and as it passes through the circle, something happens. A hum shivers through the lintels, barely audible but felt in your sternum, in the small bones of your inner ear. Your hand grips the antler mallet wrapped in hide, the bone worn smooth by hands you'll never know, and in your head the 5-tone chant you practiced in your apartment loops endlessly. The sequence you spent 3 months learning from a fragment of notation that shouldn't have existed, found pressed between the pages of a book on archaeoacoustics that appeared on your doorstep with no return address. You pace the sarsen ring, boots crunching through frost, counting lintels in the order marked on the scrap of birch bark that came with the mallet, the sequence that supposedly aligns with the midwinter sunrise line, though the sun won't breach the horizon for hours yet. Chalk notches mark certain stones, pale scratches that catch what little light reaches this place, and you understand now that these aren't random damage or the work of tourists with their small vandalisms. They're instructions, a score written in stone. You approach the first marked lintel, raise the mallet, and test a gentle tap against the massive beam of sarsen. The stone answers with a round, bell-like tone, a clear A that seems to hang in the cold air, resonating in your ribs, in your jaw, in the hollow spaces of your skull. You wait for it to fade, counting seconds, listening to how the wind carries it, bends it, gives it texture. Different lintels carry different fundamentals you discover as you move clockwise, tapping each in turn. This one a deep D that makes your teeth ache, that one a bright E that seems to lift toward the stars. The ring is a tuned instrument, deliberately, impossibly tuned, each massive stone chosen or shaped or positioned to produce a specific tone when struck just right. You begin the 5-tone sequence marked in your notes. Tap the first lintel and wait, listening for the wind-borne overtone that rises from the fundamental like smoke. The wind obliges, pulling harmonics from the stone, notes within notes, a shimmering column of sound that seems to have mass. Move to the next lintel, counting steps, positioning yourself exactly as instructed, and tap again, letting the previous note and this new one interlace, weaving together in the space between the stones. The wind changes direction slightly and the overtones shift, finding new relationships, and you feel it in your chest, that moment when 2 tones lock into consonance, when they stop fighting and start singing. 3rd tone, 4th, 5th, each added with careful timing, each allowed to bloom fully before you move on, and when all 5 notes finally hang in the air together, the space inside the circle tightens like a drum's skin pulled taut, like the air itself has become a string waiting to be plucked. Miss the timing or the placement and the tones wobble apart, beating against each other in ugly interference patterns, creating a discord that makes your vision swim and your stomach lurch. You've made that mistake twice already tonight, and both times the sensation was so viscerally wrong that you had to step outside the circle and wait for the nausea to pass. You adjust your technique, shift your stance to change the angle of impact, tap softer to lift the higher harmonics and suppress the fundamental, press the hide-wrapped head of the mallet against the stone immediately after striking to dull a harsh partial that's muddying the chord. Wind drops to nothing and you wait, frozen in place, because without the wind to carry and blend the tones the sequence won't work. You learned this the hard way on your first attempt, when you tried to force it through a calm moment, and succeeded only in creating 5 separate notes that died in isolation. Wind rises again, threading through the stones with a sigh, and you ride it, timing your taps to the gusts, using the air itself as part of the instrument. Thin ice forms in hoof prints at your feet, the marks of cattle or deer that passed through here before the stones were raised. Fossils in mud now frozen solid, and you wonder what they would make of this, those animals that once grazed where gods would later be invoked. A distant drum beats steady rhythm from somewhere beyond the ditch and earthwork that surround the stone circle, or perhaps it's just your pulse pounding in your ears. But either way, it steadies your tempo, gives you something to anchor to as the wind plays tricks with your sense of time. On your third circuit, the chord locks for a breath, for a single perfect moment, and everything changes. The sky seems nearer, as if the vault of heaven has descended to press against the top of the stone circle, and the stars sharpen, their light wiping clean some film you didn't know obscured them, each point of light now a needle prick of impossible clarity. In that locked second, the plain beyond the stones flickers with an impossible overlay. You see, or think you see, a scatter of red lights moving along a distant road that won't be built for 5,000 years, tail lights on cars that exist in a time you're not currently occupying, and the dissonance between what you're seeing and where you are is so profound that you gasp and the chord breaks, the tones sliding apart like oil on water. But you know you're close now, close to the door of sound, the threshold the instructions hinted at. The reason someone sent you a Neolithic mallet and directions for playing a stone circle, like a musical instrument on the winter solstice. Complications multiply. Your fingers have gone numb despite the wool wrapped around them, the cold of the antler mallet seeping through every layer, drawing heat from your core. The mallet's crown splinters at one tine, a sharp crack that sounds obscenely loud in the spaces between tones, and you worry the tool won't last through another full sequence. Wind veers without warning, coming now from the northeast instead of the west, and it detunes your fourth tone, pulling it flat so it grates against the others like a mistuned string on a guitar. A small fire guttering near the altar stone, the only source of light besides the stars, threatens to die, its flames beaten down by wind, and without it, you'll lose your ability to see the chalk marks, to know which stone to strike next. Somewhere beyond the ditch a horn calls, long and mournful, a sound that belongs to this time, and sends a spike of fear through your gut, because you're not supposed to be here, not really, and if whoever blew that horn finds you inside the sacred circle, you have no explanation that will save you. The horn call is swallowed by the hum that never quite stops, that perpetual drone the stones make when wind passes through them, and you realise this is part of it too, the acoustic design, the way the circle itself sings even when no one strikes it. You pull out the birch bark again, squinting at the notations in firelight, and realise there's a second sequence you missed, numbers scratched beneath the first. 31425, not the ascending order you've been using, but something more complex. A pattern that spirals rather than climbs. You commit to the new sequence, positioning yourself at the third marked lintel instead of the first, and tap. The note is a C, round and full, and you let it bloom before moving to the first position, striking an A that harmonises with a still resonating C in a way the previous order never achieved. Fourth position, second, fifth, and with each tone the chord deepens, gains dimension, becomes something more than music. It becomes architecture, a structure built from sound that has walls and a ceiling and a floor that thrums beneath your feet. The lintels vibrate just enough to make the stars tremble in sympathy, or perhaps it's your vision shaking from the subsonic pressure building inside the circle, and the chord holds for 3 full breaths before it begins to slip, the tones pulling apart as the wind shifts again, and you lose the exact timing needed to maintain resonance. Dawn is hours away. You know this from checking the stars against the astronomy app on your phone before you stepped into whatever ritual transported you here, but the window for this working is narrow. The instructions were explicit about this, about how the door only opens when certain conditions align, when the geometry of Earth and Sun and stars creates a momentary acoustic lens that focuses sound in ways physics doesn't usually allow. You must keep the chord alive, must maintain it long enough to cross the threshold, or you'll be trapped here in the deep past with no way home and a very limited understanding of how to survive in Neolithic Britain. You align yourself on the midwinter axis, heel stone to altar stone, positioning your body so that you're standing on the line the sun will draw when it finally rises, so that your taps ride the path of light that's currently arcing beneath the horizon on the far side of the earth. One more cycle, you tell yourself, one more perfect sequence, and the door will open wide enough to step through. You begin the 3-1-4-2-5 pattern again, and this time everything clicks. The wind is steady, your timing is exact, the mallet strikes true despite its damaged tine, and the chord returns deeper than before, rounder, resonating not just in air but in earth, in stone, in the marrow of your bones. In the centre of the circle, the air darkens into something that isn't quite visible, a thin vertical slit in reality that you perceive, not with your eyes but with your ears, a rippling silence, wound where all the tones converge and cancel each other out in perfect destructive interference, creating a pocket of absolute quiet in the middle of overwhelming sound. You hold the chord, striking the sequence again and again, feeding it, keeping it alive, and the slit widens until it's a doorway tall enough to walk through, though walk seems like the wrong word for what you'd be doing because the threshold isn't located in space. Not exactly. It's located in sound, in the relationship between tones, in the mathematical ratios that govern harmony. Step through, and you'll be moving not from one place to another, but from one tuning to another, from one reality frequency to a different one. The stars wheel overhead, marking time in their ancient dance, and you realise with a jolt that they're moving too fast, that hours are passing in minutes, that the acoustic lens is bending time as well as space, and if you don't move soon, you'll miss the window entirely. You wait for the first cold blue of dawn, for that precise moment when the sun's light begins to bend around the curve of the earth and touch the heel stone, and when it comes, when that first ray of winter sun lances through the circle and strikes the altar stone dead centre, you know it's time to close the door. You walk the circle in reverse, counterclockwise against the sun, striking the lintels backward through the sequence, 5-2-4-1-3. Each tone now works to unmake the chord, to unweave the fabric of sound you've spent the night constructing, and you feel it unravelling, feel the tension in the air relaxing, the doorway beginning to close. After the final tap, you hold perfectly still and let the note decay to true silence. Not the absence of sound, but its resolution. All frequencies returning to their source. And as the last vibration dies, the slit opens behind your hearing. Not in front of you, but somehow inside your head. And you understand that you've been standing in the doorway this whole time. That the threshold isn't something you cross, but something you become. You step forward and the chalk beneath your feet becomes wet concrete. The stars vanish into light pollution. The massive trilithons flicker and are suddenly smaller, broken, diminished by centuries of weather and collapse and archaeological reconstruction. You're back, standing inside the rope barriers that keep tourists away from the stones, and the sky is the wrong colour for deep night. Dawn breaking pink and orange instead of the deep blue you just left behind. Your phone buzzes in your pocket. 17 missed calls, a dozen texts asking where you are. Because apparently 3 days have passed since you stepped into the circle, even though you experienced only one night, and you realise with a sinking feeling that time moves differently inside the acoustic lens that you've just lost a weekend to prehistory. Back home, back in your apartment with its thin walls and traffic noise, and the constant hum of electricity in the wires, something is off. Your phone rings, and the tone is different, shifted to an interval that sounds ancient, that resonates with something deep in your hindbrain. The elevator ding on your floor takes a new pitch, a perfect fifth above what it used to be, and it hangs in the air longer than it should, as if the shaft has become a resonating chamber. The crosswalk beep outside your window answers in fifths, harmonising with itself in ways electronic tones shouldn't be able to do, and you realise with growing unease that the world has been retuned, that by playing the stones you've adjusted some fundamental frequency, and everything in your environment is now calibrating itself to match. Rooms you enter gather their own resonances. You clap once to test the acoustics of your kitchen, and the air replies in Stonehenge's scale, producing overtones that climb toward the ceiling and hang there like visible structures. Your bathroom rings with a deep D when you flush the toilet, your bedroom hums an A when the radiator kicks on, and your living room produces a perfect fifth chord when you walk from the window to the couch, your footfalls exciting resonances in the floor that shouldn't exist in a modern apartment building. It's beautiful at first, this new tuning, this sense that you're living inside an instrument, that every action produces music, that the chaos of urban sound has been organised into something approaching harmony. You find yourself moving differently, timing your steps to produce interesting intervals, clapping in corners to hear how the room responds, humming notes to see what overtones emerge from the walls. But then it becomes disorienting. Alarms hide in harmonics. Your smoke detector's chirp is now a perfect octave above a frequency your refrigerator produces, and the two tones combine into a beating pattern that sounds exactly like your alarm clock, sending you into panic spirals at random moments throughout the day. Voices seem tuned to the ring, and conversations take on musical qualities that make it hard to focus on meaning. Your co-worker's speech patterns now emphasize the same intervals you heard in the Stones, and you find yourself listening to the melody of his words rather than their content, nodding along to rhythms instead of responding to questions. Your own voice sounds strange, resonating in your chest and head in ways it never did before, as if you've become an instrument too, as if the retuning is working from the inside out. You try to adapt. You download frequency analyzers and spectrum apps, trying to map the new acoustic landscape of your life, trying to find patterns you can predict and work around. You wear earplugs in public, muffling the world to manageable levels, but the tones penetrate anyway, conducted through bone, felt in your body even when your ears are blocked. You move through the city like someone learning to hear for the first time, and in a sense you are. You're hearing relationships between sounds that were always there but now they're foregrounded, impossible to ignore, dominating your perception, until the actual information carried by the sounds becomes secondary to their tonal qualities. On the next solstice, summer now instead of winter, you return to Stonehenge with a plan to test if you can retune back, if you can undo what you've done and restore your world to its previous discordant but navigable state. The circle remembers you. You feel it the moment you approach, the stones producing a welcoming hum in your personal scale, recognizing the frequency signature you've been carrying since that winter night. You try the inverse order of the sequence, softer taps to produce gentler harmonics, and you time it to match the wind differently, using the summer breezes that flow warmer and more chaotically than winter's steady cold. The door opens, yes, as you knew it would, but as you work through the sequence you feel something else changing, another layer of reality shifting its tuning, and you realize that each successful chord you play adjusts not just your perception, but the actual physical properties of sound in your environment, that you're rewriting acoustic physics itself in a bubble that travels with you everywhere you go. You complete the ritual and step back through, and now things are worse. Traffic sounds have organized themselves into rhythmic patterns that mimic heartbeats, making you constantly feel like someone is running toward you from behind. Bird songs have shifted into the pentatonic scale, and they sing in rounds canonically, as if they've been rehearsing. Rain on Your Window plays arpeggios, each drop time to produce ascending scales, and you start to suspect that the retuning isn't just changing how you hear, but changing how sound itself behaves within a certain radius of your body, that you've become a walking acoustic lens bending reality around you. You return again on the autumn equinox, then the winter solstice again, each time trying different approaches, faster tempos, different mallets, altered sequences, and each time the door opens and each time you make things worse, more coherent, more musical, until the modern world around you is tilted so far toward a prehistoric key that you barely recognize it. Your neighbors start to notice, commenting on how musical your apartment building has become, how the elevator seems to sing, how footsteps in the hallway ring like bells. Some find it charming, this new acoustic environment, but others are disturbed by it, complaining of headaches and vertigo, saying they can't think straight because everything sounds like it's part of a song they can't quite remember. You stand at your window in pre-dawn light, listening to a city that now sings more than it speaks, where alarms and sirens have tuned themselves into chords, where the rumble of the subway produces bass drones that underpin everything else like a massive organ, where even the wind through the buildings plays scales instead of just whistling randomly. One more trip to the Stones could make it all coherent, you think, could tune everything so perfectly that it all makes sense, that the chaos resolves into a single, massive symphony with every sound in its proper place. You picture it, a world where acoustic laws have been rewritten, where physics itself has been tuned to match the geometry of Stonehenge, where every city is an instrument, and every person a note in an endless composition. But you also remember why humans invented discordant sounds in the first place, because alarms need to be alarming, because signals need to stand out from background noise, because navigation requires the ability to distinguish between different information streams, not have them all blend into harmonic unity. You remember trying to hear your phone ring yesterday and missing the call because the ringtone had harmonized so perfectly with the ambient sound of traffic that it disappeared into the texture, became indistinguishable from everything else. You remember walking through a crosswalk while the signal was red because the beeping had become so musical, so integrated into the soundscape, that you stopped processing it as a warning and heard it only as part of the city's endless song. One more trip could make it all coherent, yes, but coherent for what purpose? Beautiful but useless, harmonious but dangerous, a world tuned to prehistoric frequencies that served prehistoric needs, where sound was primarily ceremonial, where acoustic design was about creating sacred space rather than conveying information efficiently. You think about emergency, sirens that sing in fifths, about smoke alarms that harmonize with refrigerators, about crosswalk signals that play arpeggios instead of alerting, and you realize that you're trading orientation and safety for beauty and belonging, that you're slowly making your world uninhabitable in your quest to maintain connection with something ancient and powerful. You set the antler mallet down on your windowsill, placing it carefully so it won't roll, and you make a choice. You will not return to the stones, will not attempt any more retunings, will let the world remain partially wild and partially harmonized, a compromise between prehistoric music and modern signal. The last overtoned ring in your chest fades as you make this decision. That perpetual hum you've been carrying since the first ritual finally quieting, but a fundamental remains. A quiet drone you can still hear if you focus, like a compass you can hear instead of see, pointing always toward Salisbury Plain, toward the circle of stones that still remembers how to sing, toward a door in sound that you can open but have chosen to leave closed, at least for now, at least until you can be sure that what lies on the other side is worth the price of losing your way home. You set the antler mallet down on your windowsill, placing it carefully so it won't roll, and you make a choice. You will not return to the stones, will not attempt any more retunings, will let the world remain partially wild and partially harmonized, a compromise between prehistoric music and modern signal. The last overtoned ring in your chest fades as you make this decision, that perpetual hum you've been carrying since the first ritual finally quieting, but a fundamental remains, a quiet drone you can still hear if you focus, like a compass you can hear instead of see, pointing always toward Salisbury Plain, toward the circle of stones that still remembers how to sing, toward a door in sound that you can open but have chosen to leave closed, at least for now, at least until you can be sure that what lies on the other side is worth the price of losing your way home. But the world doesn't let you rest in that decision. 3 weeks after you place the mallet on the sill and walk away, you notice the retuning is spreading. Not just your apartment now, not just your building, but a growing circle with you at its centre, expanding outward at a rate you can measure if you pay attention, if you walk the streets with your ears open and your mind tracking, which sounds have shifted into the ancient scale, and which still retain their modern discord. You map it obsessively, marking boundaries on a street map with coloured pencil, your block entirely converted, the neighbouring blocks showing signs, the park 2 streets over beginning to resonate with that familiar Stonehenge hum when wind moves through the trees just right. The expansion is slow, perhaps 50 feet per day, but it's steady, inexorable, as if you've become a tuning fork, struck once and still vibrating, still sending out waves that reorganize everything they touch. You meet others who've noticed. A sound engineer at the coffee shop 3 blocks from your apartment stops you one morning, asks if you've heard it too, the way everything started ringing differently, the way the espresso machine now produces a perfect A when it releases steam, the way cups settling on saucers make intervals instead of just noise. You deflect, claiming you haven't noticed anything unusual, but he's insistent, excited even, pulling out his phone to show you frequency analysis charts, spectrograms that show the fundamental shifting across dozens of recordings he's made over the past weeks. He thinks it's some kind of acoustic phenomenon, maybe related to changes in air pressure or humidity, some meteorological event that's altering how sound propagates through the neighbourhood. You nod, non-committal, and leave before he can press you further, but his charts confirm what you already suspected. The retuning isn't in your head, isn't subjective, it's measurable, objective, real. A musician in your building, A cellist you've passed in the hallway but never spoken to leaves a note under your door. She's noticed that her instrument has gone out of tune with itself, that the strings ring sympathetically with sounds from outside in ways they never did before, that when she plays certain passages the walls answer back, harmonising, and she finds herself adjusting her playing to match the environment rather than standard tuning. She's not complaining exactly. The note makes that clear. She's fascinated, energised by it, finding new musical possibilities in the way her apartment has become an extension of her instrument. But she wants to know if you've experienced anything similar, if you have any theories, if maybe you'd like to collaborate on something, explore this phenomenon together. You don't respond to the note, afraid that engaging will reveal your role in this, that somehow your guilt will show through, that she'll look at you and know you're the epicenter, the source. The fundamental in your chest grows louder. You thought it was fading when you set down the mallet, but that was just a moment of quiet before it came back stronger, insistent, demanding attention. It pulses now, not constantly but in waves, and you start to notice the pattern. It intensifies when you're near acoustic focal points, places where sound naturally concentrates or reflects in interesting ways. Underground stations amplify it until you have to cover your ears, the fundamental resonating with the tunnel architecture, creating feedback loops that make your vision blur. Highway underpasses do it too, and parking garages, and the stone-walled cemetery 4 blocks north that predates most of the neighbourhood. You avoid these places when you can, but the city is full of them, and sometimes there's no choice but to walk through and endure the intensity, the way the fundamental swells until it feels like your ribcage might crack from the pressure of containing it. You start researching, trying to understand what you've done, what mechanisms you've triggered. The book that arrived on your doorstep with the mallet and instructions. You tear through it again, reading past the marked pages this time, looking for context, for warnings, for anything that might explain the expanding zone of retuned acoustics. You find references to other stone circles, other megalithic sites built with acoustic properties in mind, and a theory that these weren't just ceremonial spaces but actual instruments designed to manipulate sound in ways that could affect consciousness, could open doors in perception, could tune human awareness to frequencies that allowed communication with something the text never quite names, but implies exists in the spaces between tones. There's a passage about harmonic fields, about how sustained resonance at certain frequencies can create persistent alterations in local physics, acoustic imprinting on the environment that outlasts the original sound source, and you realise with growing horror that this is what you've done. You've imprinted Stonehenge's frequencies onto your neighbourhood, and now the imprint is growing, spreading, potentially unstoppable. You try to reverse it without returning to the stones. You spend a weekend playing recordings of industrial noise through speakers pointed out your window, trying to inject discord into the environment, trying to disrupt the harmonic patterns that have taken hold. It doesn't work. The noise simply gets incorporated into the larger structure, finding its place in the overtone series, becoming another voice in the chorus rather than drowning it out. You try white noise generators, tone generators producing random frequencies, even just banging pots and pans together at odd hours until your neighbours complain, but nothing breaks the pattern. The retuning has momentum now, has become self-sustaining, drawing energy from every sound made within its boundaries, using that energy to expand further, to bring more of the acoustic landscape into alignment with the fundamental. Your sleep deteriorates. In dreams you're back at the stones, but now there are others there with you, figures moving in the darkness beyond the trilithons, and they're playing too, striking the lintels in sequences that counterpoint yours, building chords you never intended, opening doors you didn't know existed. You wake to find your room vibrating at the fundamental frequency, pictures rattling on walls, water in the glass on your nightstand showing concentric ripples like someone's tapping the table, though no one is. The building settles at night the way all buildings do, expansion and contraction, heating and cooling, but now it settles musically, playing descending scales as materials shift, and you lie awake listening to your home sing itself to sleep. People start moving, into the neighbourhood specifically because of the sound. You see it in local forums, on neighbourhood social media, posts about the amazing acoustics, about how musical everything feels, about what a creative and inspiring environment it's become. Artists are arriving, musicians and sound designers and composers, drawn by word of mouth, by recordings that have started circulating online, by the reputation that's building of a place where the laws of sound work differently. more beautifully. Rent prices tick upward. Coffee shops advertise their resonant spaces. Galleries promote acoustic art installations. A new music venue opens specifically designed to work with the ambient tuning rather than against it. You watch your neighbourhood transform, gentrifying on a wave of sound, and you feel like a fraud, like someone who's created something valuable entirely by accident and can take no credit for it, because taking credit would mean admitting responsibility, admitting you don't know how to control it, admitting you might have started something dangerous. The sound engineer from the coffee shop publishes a paper. You find it online, a preprint on an acoustics research archive titled Emergent Harmonic Structures in Urban Soundscapes, a Case Study. He's documented the phenomenon meticulously, recording sites across a half-mile radius, analysing the data, demonstrating that the acoustic environment is indeed shifting toward a specific set of ratios. A specific tuning system that he notes bears resemblance to scales found in various ancient musical traditions. He proposes several hypotheses: resonance effects from construction materials, electromagnetic interference affecting audio equipment, even mass psychological suggestion, but admits none fully explain the scope and consistency of the changes. The paper gets attention, not widespread, but enough, picked up by a few science blogs and acoustic specialty publications, and suddenly researchers are interested, wanting to visit, wanting to measure, wanting to understand. You panic. Researchers mean scrutiny, mean questions, mean eventually someone tracking the phenomenon back to its origin, back to you. You consider moving, just packing up and leaving, letting the retuned zone continue without you, but the fundamental in your chest suggests that won't help, that you're bound to it now, that wherever you go you'll carry it with you, starting new zones of retuning in whatever neighbourhood you land in next, spreading it across the city, eventually across regions, maybe across continents if you move enough. You're a carrier, infected with a frequency that wants to propagate, that uses you as its vector, and there's no quarantine possible because sound travels through everything, through air and water and solid matter, through walls and floors and the very earth itself. The cellist appears at your door instead of leaving another note. You open it to find her standing there with her instrument, and before, you can make excuses, she asks directly. It's you, isn't it? The centre of it. You try to deny it, but she shakes her head, not buying it, and explains that she's been triangulating, mapping where the effect is strongest, where the harmonics are purest, and every measurement points back to this building, this floor, this apartment. She's not angry. She emphasises that immediately, seeing the fear in your face. She's grateful, actually, because the retuning has opened up her playing in ways she never imagined, has made her reconsider everything she thought she knew about her instrument, about music itself. But she needs to know what you did, how you did it, because she wants to learn, wants to participate in whatever this is consciously rather than just being subject to it passively. You let her in because what else can you do? And over coffee you tell her everything. The book, the mallet, the solstice ritual, the time travel or dimensional shift or whatever it was, the realization that you've changed something fundamental about how sound behaves in your vicinity. She listens without interrupting, and when you finish she sits quietly for a long moment before asking if she can see the mallet. You retrieve it from the windowsill, hand it over, and she examines it carefully, running her fingers over the antler tines, testing its weight, and then she looks up and says, "You know you're not done, right? This isn't something you can just walk away from. It chose you, or you chose it, and now you have to see it through." You argue that you've made your choice, that you're not going back, that the risk is too high. She counters that the risk is higher now, with the retuning spreading uncontrolled, with no guidance or intention behind it except whatever momentum it's gathered on its own. She suggests that maybe the answer isn't to stop, but to direct, to shape the retuning consciously, instead of letting it sprawl chaotically, to turn it into something genuinely useful, rather than just beautiful and disorienting. She proposes a collaboration. She has musical training, understands acoustics and harmony, and how to work with resonant spaces, and together maybe you could figure out how to manage this, how to create boundaries or focal points, how to make the retuned zone work for people instead of just happening to them. You're resistant but also desperate for help, for someone to share this burden with, for another perspective on a problem that's been eating you alive for months now. You agree to think about it, and she leaves you her number, tells you to call when you're ready, and you spend the next 3 days barely eating or sleeping, just pacing your apartment and listening to it sing, listening to the neighbourhood sing, tracking the expansion of the retuned zone on your map, and trying to calculate how long before it reaches some critical threshold, some point where it can't be ignored or explained away as a local anomaly. The decision is made for you when the fundamental suddenly intensifies, doubling in amplitude overnight, strong enough now that other people are starting to feel it, starting to mention a strange pressure in their chests, a vibration they can sense but can't quite hear. Posts appear in neighbourhood forums asking if anyone else feels the humming, if maybe there's construction happening underground, some kind of machinery running constantly. You know what it means. The retuning has reached some kind of critical mass, has accumulated enough harmonic energy that it's starting to affect not just sound but physical sensation, the precursor to potentially affecting matter itself if the process continues unchecked. You call the cellist. She arrives within an hour, instrument in hand, and you explain what's happening, how the fundamental is growing, how it feels like pressure building with no release valve. She thinks for a moment, then suggests you need to create an outlet, a way for the accumulated harmonic energy to discharge safely rather than continuing to build. She proposes a performance, a public event where you deliberately work with the retuned acoustics, channeling them through music, giving them form and direction, and a way to express rather than just accumulate. It's risky. It means revealing yourself as connected to the phenomenon, but it might also stabilize things, might give you some measure of control. You agree because you're out of better options, and together you start planning. She brings in other musicians from the neighbourhood, people who've noticed the changes and adapted their playing to work with them, and you become the coordinator, the one who understands the fundamental, who can feel where the acoustic focal points are, who can guide the group to locations and times when the resonance will be strongest. You scout sites, the stone-walled cemetery, a highway underpass with particularly rich reverb, an abandoned church with intact but unused bells in its tower, and you map out a route, a procession that will move through the retuned zone hitting these focal points in sequence, creating a deliberate pattern of harmonic discharge that might release the built-up pressure. The night before the performance you return to Stonehenge one last time, but not to play the stones. You go to observe, to remember, to reconnect with the original source of all this. Security is tighter than it was on your first visit, or maybe you were lucky that winter solstice night, but you managed to get close enough to feel the stone's presence, to hear that perpetual hum they produce when wind threads through them. You sit in the grass beyond the fence line and you listen. Really listen, trying to understand what the stones were meant to do, what function they served beyond the ceremonial. And sitting there in the darkness, you realise they were never meant to hold the door open, never meant to sustain the retuning permanently. They were designed for temporary openings, brief connections, moments of contact with whatever frequency realm lies beyond normal perception. You've misused them by trying to establish a permanent link, by carrying the resonance back with you instead of leaving it at the threshold. The performance happens on the spring equinox, deliberate timing to work with the astronomical alignments that seem to strengthen the effect. 24 musicians gather at your apartment, and you lead them out into the neighbourhood, carrying instruments, carrying the antler mallet which you've decided to use openly now, and you move through the streets playing. The cellist leads the melodic line, others provide harmony and rhythm, and you strike metal posts and concrete walls and stone surfaces with the mallet, adding percussive punctuation that resonates with the fundamental, that channels it outward rather than letting it accumulate inward. People come out of their homes to watch, to listen, some joining the procession, some just standing on stoops and sidewalks experiencing the sound. At each focal point you stop and play a longer piece, something the cellist has composed specifically to work with the site's acoustics, and you feel the fundamental responding, feel the pressure easing as the harmonic energy finds expression through the music. The stone-walled cemetery rings like a bell, the whole space vibrating in sympathy with the strings and wind instruments, and your mallet striking granite headstones. The highway underpass becomes a cathedral, traffic noise from above integrating into the performance, car tyres on asphalt providing a steady drone that grounds everything else. The abandoned church wakes up, its bells humming in sympathetic resonance, even though no one's pulling the ropes, responding to the frequencies rising from below, and for a moment the whole neighbourhood sings together, coherent and intentional and managed. The pressure releases. You feel it in your chest, the fundamental finally relaxing, finding equilibrium instead of endless building tension. The retuned zone stops expanding. You verify this over the following weeks, walking the boundaries, discovering that they've stabilized, that the acoustic alterations have reached their limit, and are holding steady rather than continuing to spread. It's not perfect. You've still changed things permanently, still created a pocket of reality where sound behaves according to ancient rules, but it's contained now, manageable, a permanent feature of your neighbourhood rather than an encroaching wave threatening to swallow the city. You keep the mallet, but you don't use it casually, understanding now that it's a tool requiring responsibility and intention. The cellist becomes a regular collaborator, and together you develop a practice of periodic performances that maintain the balance, that keep the harmonic energy circulating rather than stagnating or building dangerously. Other neighbourhoods reach out, people who've heard about what you've done, who want something similar for their communities, but you refuse to export it, refuse to seed new retuned zones, knowing that one is enough, knowing that some doors should be opened rarely and carefully, rather than flung wide and left unguarded. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy.